Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Louisville Cube League's new series that we're trying out here. We're going to be doing archetype breakdowns of things we've played in the Vintage Cube, starting with a very popular archetype, Boros Aggro, this week. My name's Joey.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Prose.
And the first thing we're going to talk about is our history with the archetype. We want to talk about where we've played the archetype before and the current state of it in the Magic Online Cube. I've been playing Cube for just over a decade, like 12 or 13 years myself. I know you guys have been playing longer than that, right?
Yeah, I've been playing ever since I learned about it as a format, which, God, it must have been 2007, 2008 maybe. So however many years that is, I kind of don't want to know the answer to it, honestly.
Yeah, probably about the same for me. I mean, that was about the time that I came to Louisville and joined the crew, so probably roughly the same.
And aggro's always been an archetype in the cube, at least, again, for all of those years, because going as far back as very old Magic, we have cards like Savannah Lion. When I was new to Magic, Goblin Guide was around. And the thing I mainly wanted to ask about is I noticed that the aggro decks I used to draft, I was the only one who wanted those cards. However, it feels like there's been a transition over the last 5 years or so where the Magic Online Cube has taken on this form where the really good aggro cards are also just really good in other decks as well. I was curious if that kind of matched your all's opinion. I have here a few of what I consider those differences. The cards on the left in the previous cubes. I could confidently take something over Hellrider and know that it would pass if I was the only one in it. Or table if I was the only one in aggro. Nowadays, like, the premier cards, everyone at the table probably wants.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, you've got Savannah Lines on there. You're also missing some old bangers like, Jackal Pup and, like, the Chain Lightning effects that, again, just nobody else at the table is even looking twice at.
Certainly. Jackal Pup, Elite Vanguard, Dauntless Bodyguard. I have Kithian on here, who is maybe one of the newer ones before that transition. But I think they all kind of are the same in that respect, even though Kithian is a better version of Jackal Pup. Fire Drink Crusader the same way. They were still the same in that no one else wanted those cards. Kithian's really good. I don't recall very often seeing a player who wasn't in aggro playing Kithian. Whereas I feel like I see all these newer cards in way more decks. Thraben Inspector is actually the one that I want to talk about as what I think is maybe the key to that transition, or not key, but indicator of it, because I was curious. Thraben Inspector came out in April 2016, nearly a decade ago, but I don't remember playing with it much in cubes at that time. I looked into it, and the first time it showed up on the Magic Online Cube was December 2019, so more than 3 years after it first came out. Kind of that transition from the 2010s into 2020s feels like the era where a lot of this transition's taken place.
Yeah, some of that, too, is probably just because of, I think, the growth or like the growing popularity of Cube, because I mean, I don't know how many times the Magic Online Cube was getting updated, in 2017, 2018 as well. So, and how many, people were actually dedicated to that.
For sure. Looking back historically, it was updating less, only 2 or 3 times a year, it seems. And it updates a lot more now, but that's also because we have a lot more sets now that
I was going to say
into it. Mainly wanted to mention that because looking here at the bottom, I have the removal. The removal has stayed the same over those years, even though all the other cards kind of changed around it. It used to be, in my memory at least, very easy to pick a lightning bolt early in a pack, knowing that the Goblin Guide was going to come back around the table, right? Whereas none of these cards on the right are ever tabling most of the time. Do you guys feel like the amount you draft aggro. I consider everyone in our league to be pretty diverse in what they draft, but I definitely feel like I found myself in the archetype a lot more a decade ago than I do now. And I don't think that's necessarily that I was a newer player, but because I was playing a bunch of competitive, complicated decks in tournaments, but I was drawn to it more in Cube, I feel, before than I am these days. Curious if you guys feel the same or differently.
I tend to. I think I sort of lean back into aggro when I am not feeling on top of my game sometimes. Like it's the old fallacy, right? Like the aggressive deck takes less effort to play. So when I'm like tired or whatever, sometimes I'm just like, let me put right cards in my deck and sort of work my way out from there. But I'm not sure that's like a great strategy that people should repeat. It's just kind of how I've approached the archetype.
I think historically it has been true. I think the statement I'm making here is that maybe it's harder in the draft phase, even if it is still the same, maybe when playing out the matches. I think the draft portion, as I've mentioned, has gotten harder just to have that security.
Yeah, I think for me, I would kind of file that under like back then. You know, we cubed less. We played other types of Magic more, and when I cubed, you know, there were decks that I thought I wanted to play, and aggro wasn't necessarily on that list because that was something you could just play in, you know, pretty much any constructed format ever. So it's just more of a like, I'm playing this format for fun. I want to do something that I think is going to be more fun. That kind of leaned me away from aggro. And over time, well, that's gone away because I don't really play constructed Magic anymore. And also, you know, these decks have gotten more interesting and more willing to just go where the draft takes me than to come in with like a preconceived notion of like what is or isn't fun. And you know, drafting is always fun. So
Gotcha. That makes sense that some of the newer cards give more variety than filling your deck with variants of Savannah Lion, so you get to still have more of that unique gameplay match to match.
And it certainly also feels to me like the power spikes are less egregious now. Like the creatures have sort of caught up to the spells as it was back in the day. Um, so you know your opponent might ancestral recall on turn one or whatever. And 10 years ago, as the aggro deck, you're like, can I even compete with all these extra cards? Like I just have 1 mana 2/1s with little to no text. But now, like all your cards do so much that you can fight through that in some of those games.
And I think a lot of that goes to the top end getting a lot scarier. We have a couple of examples here, and that's going to transition us into the bulk of our discussion where we're going to be talking about the cards in the current vintage cube or cards that have recently been in that we expect to return, and just give our thoughts on how we value those different cards, ranking them in our different categories of how playable they are versus when we might want to try to avoid playing different pieces. I have everything set up here by mana cost and by type for the most part, with some exceptions that we'll get to. But starting out with the 1-drops. The 1-drops, a lot of value, a lot of variety these days. We're going to start with Dragon Rage's Channeler. I don't feel like I'm that impressed by this card. I'm curious by your all's opinion on its place in aggro.
I think for me,
pretty low on it.
Yeah, I think it probably falls into the either the lower end of the probably play tier or like the upper end of the maybe play tier. Mostly just dependent on like, you know, basically how often the surveil is relevant in your deck. I don't know that I would necessarily call it a combo play, but
Right. Are you guys okay with me? It's our first card. We can maybe move it, but I feel like I would put it at the top of maybe play just because I think you're just so unlikely in cube in general to get delirium consistently, let alone in aggro where if you're not hitting delirium quick, this could remain a 1/1 for half the game or more.
yeah, and I mean
So
1-drops are important even if they are, you know, Dragon's Rage Channeler. So I do think it is above average, but yeah, I think like you said, it's tough to get delirium. and especially if you don't have a ton of non-creature cards in your deck to be, you know, consistently surveilling with it.
Maybe that's helped by a couple of artifact creatures. We have several of them on the board. Our next one we're going to talk about is Esper Sentinel. So this is one I like a lot more, though if I'm not heavy white and if I'm not feeling very certain I can play this on turn one, I still am not super high on it, but I think I'm higher on it than Channeler.
I can't imagine a ton of Boros Aggro decks that I don't want to play this in.
So you're saying for you it's towards the top end of probably play, or are you saying it's pretty much locked as an always?
It might be like straddling those two lines, so maybe the top of probably for me, but it is up there for sure, yeah.
I'm fine with it in either of those positions. Pros, any thoughts?
Yeah, if you have something that lets you grow it, which I'm not even really sure, glancing through here, how many effects there are consistently of that in this archetype at this point. I mean, there's some equipment.
Luminarch Aspirant.
Yeah, stuff like Luminarch Aspirant is, you know, Luminarch Aspirant, I think, immediately puts both of those cards into always play. But yeah, I think top of probably play is about right. Like, I would be willing to cut this card from decks, but not very often.
I should also note too that it's an easy card to sideboard out if your opponent doesn't show a lot of non-creature spells, but it is Vintage Cube, so that it's not going to come up all that often.
For sure, you're hoping when playing aggro that you're the deck at the table that's mostly creatures, not any of your opponents.
Yeah, but you can side this out against like the green ramp deck if they're just all like elves and whatnot.
Do you feel like the artifact type matters here? I feel like it rarely comes up. Obviously, we're not going to talk about too many of the artifacts matters cards in this discussion, but there are plenty of them in the cube. Do you feel like that interaction comes up when you're playing aggro at all, or is it pretty much flavor text that it's an artifact most of the time?
I think in this archetype, that's mostly flavor text, except that your creature can be shattered. But
Yeah, I'm trying to look through and see. I mean, there's Galvanic Blast. That's about the only thing that I think cares, really.
Right. There's, besides Dragon Rage's Channeler, there's also Fear of Missing Out as Delirium, so there's a couple of things that it fulfills, but I agree. I think I'm trying to think of the cards in Artifacts Matters cards that you would ever consider playing in aggro, even though they aren't here. Like,
I mean, you could maybe sneak like a Urza Saga, or like if you're feeling really froggy, like a Mox Opal or something. And if you're doing those, obviously this card is way better. But yeah, not sure how often. At least with Opal, I think Saga is probably a pretty easy include in these decks. But
that's a very good point. I wasn't considering Saga. I've left the lands off of this list just because I think as we talk about different archetypes, the lands will get similar valuations throughout. Maybe we'll do an episode devoted to lands at some point, but I think for most of the time we're going to leave them off the list.
Right.
Okay, so I'm satisfied with it there. Let's talk about Figure of Destiny. Historically survived many iterations of the cube. I believe it was recently removed, but I feel confident it's going to come back sometimes. I feel like maybe I'm overrating this card, but to me it's an always play very easily.
I think I can live with it in the always play cube, but I think it's definitely near the bottom because I think it is the most versatile, whereas, you know, there's not really any conditions to putting this card in your red-white deck. But I think that, you know, even like take Dragon's Rage Channeler, for instance. I think that when Dragon's Rage Channeler is enabled by your deck, I think it's better than Figure of Destiny. But if it's not, you know, Figure of Destiny is obviously always, you always know what you're getting with it.
And I'm more so thinking of the hands where you have a red 2-drop, several red lands, but no planes yet. If you have, or vice versa. If you have
Or the
to
opposite,
drop
yeah.
a white creature, yeah. It just, the fact that it can make your color difficult hands maybe be able to last the early turns to hopefully draw that extra color on either side, I think makes it even higher value for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with always play. I just think the flexibility and the options it gives you on every turn that you have it in play are pretty valuable, and it enables your opponent to make like poor plays in the face of like, if they realize they can't answer a 4/4, they're gonna have to like always leave mana up. So if you go to poop it, they can kill it. I just think the myriad choices that are presented to both players when that card enters the battlefield, it makes it a card I always want to have in my deck if I'm playing this archetype.
Next up, I want to talk about maybe two cards at the same time, unless you guys have a reason that we wouldn't talk about Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes together.
No, let's do them at the same time.
Are these, I have to assume they're in these top tiers. Are we putting them above Figure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
Mom is above Giver, and yeah, they're both above Figure in my book.
Right, there's not enough colorless stuff in the cube to make Giver's ability to give protection from colorless come anywhere near Mom's ability to protect herself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's not much that needs to be said about these. They're incredibly powerful. If you play them on turn one, it goes a long way in blanking just all of the targeted interaction that your opponent could present. They're aces. They're just fantastic.
Right, your opponent often has to present 2 removal spells in a turn, and that means they have to have the mana for 2 removal spells in the turn, which means you've had several turns to develop yourself without any interruption. Of note, Mom is the ability to protect herself is enough better than Giver of Runes not being able to protect themselves that I could easily see us slotting some card at some point in between them on the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Our next card is a newer addition to the cube, Grease Wrench Goblin. It's another one of the Jackal Pup variants, but this one can do some discarding with an exhaust ability for 3 mana to draw cards and put +1/+1 counter on it, so it can go up to a 3/2. I like all the Jackal Pup effects. Like, I think what's going to be the case, a lot of our 1-drops, I think, are going to be our, on average, highest rated category, just because I feel like in aggro, I want to play as many 1-drops as possible.
Yeah, I have a hard time giving this card like a completely fair rating. I think I've never cast it. I've never seen it cast against me. I do tend to think that card draw, card filtering is kind of a rare thing to come across in this deck. So having this ability does seem like it would be really nice.
It is nice. At 3 mana, it is pretty expensive, so I'm seeing this as a very slight upgraded Jackal Pup Savannah Lion type. Like,
Yeah.
truly, I think Kithion probably is better. We haven't seen Kithion in cubes for a while, so for that reason, I'd be willing to put it at the bottom of probably play or the top of maybe play.
Yeah, I think personally, I'd put it near the top of maybe play. That, again, is mostly just coming from unfamiliarity. I do think this card is probably only included because it is in the newest set, which, is a great way to find cool new cards, but
Yeah, I'm not sure about the future of this guy. I don't have any disagreements about the placement you guys have suggested. It's strange because it reads like, it's all upside or whatever, but I've never had it in play and wanted to activate the ability. So I don't know if the decks just are good at having lots of other ways to spend their mana or what's going on there, but I've just not been super impressed with it. Again, not a ton of experience, but I played with it a little bit.
it is pretty nice that, they've been putting the activate this as a sorcery on a lot of things recently, but Exhaust doesn't have that. So, it is kind of nice to be able to, if you're playing a deck that wants to be, holding up mana for, fling and burn spells at your opponent's creatures or whatever.
That's
to have a
true.
little flexibility, but
Similar to Figure of Destiny, it can be done in combat, but the only 1/1/1/1 counter getting it up to 2 toughness is a lot different from Figure's 3 mana ability putting it at 4 toughness. So, like, yeah, I'm not convinced this card is better than Dauntless Bodyguard, which I haven't seen in, I think, 5 years.
yeah.
So, Grim Lavamancer. Talk about a card I've seen for the entire length of playing Vintage Cube. Grim Lavamancer's an old one. I feel like the graveyard is slow to fill in aggro sometimes, but I'm a fan, I think.
I think, and I don't have the data on hand to back this up, so kind of just, talking here, but I would guess that over time that the ratio of spells to creatures has skewed more towards creatures, which does result in the graveyard filling up slower, which I think has kind of cooled Grim Lavamancer a bit. Also, effects like Delirium or, there's some threshold cards floating around, kind of lessens. You don't want to be emptying your own graveyard as much as you used to not really care about it.
I think it is also worth noting that historically, this archetype may have been more focused on direct damage and like things like Sulfuric Vortex being the be all end all. But as we've mentioned a few times, it's way more like creature focused and on the board now. So Grim Lavamancer used to be sort of like a threat you could play early, and it just threatens to like ping your opponent to death over the course of several turns after you've fire blasted them or whatever. And now that just doesn't come up that much. It's like you mentioned, the graveyards are not filling up, and that's because you're not throwing as much burn at your opponent directly. And if your opponent also doesn't have like small creatures that Lavamancer can take out, it really doesn't end up doing a ton in most games. That's why I was going to suggest sideboard play for this one, because if my opponent has a bunch of like Llanowar Elves and Noble Hierarchs, then yeah, I want this in my deck to try and like pick those off. But other than that, I'm probably not starting it.
I can agree with that. I think one statement you said was interesting because I agree the archetype used to have a lot more burn and like kind of reach, and Grim Lavamancer feels like an artifact of that a little bit. And on one hand, it's nice to still have a card that has reach. If your opponent stabilizes at a low life total, just having this that can activate to deal the last few points is nice. But maybe all of those cards aren't in the cube anymore for a reason, as the decks have gotten better at getting to that 20, not falling just 1 or 2 points short anymore. Our next card will be Guide of Souls. So
I think this is a card that anybody who follows Modern is tired of looking at or reading. I think in Cube it's pretty similar. I think this belongs pretty solidly in the always play category. You're not going to be playing this deck without a bunch of creatures. It, gains you life, gains you energy, which doesn't have a ton of other uses, but even just its ability alone is enough to justify it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it is a bad mid-game one-drop, but like all the one-drops are going to have diminishing returns in the mid-game, obviously, but if you've already played a lot of creatures and you're not playing something that's generating creatures, I think this is maybe on the lower end of always play for me. If you have something generating a lot of tokens, then obviously it becomes more valuable, but
right.
Yeah. Scott, are you okay with it at the end of this category?
Yeah, I fully agree. Yes.
Okay. Another newer card, Kellen Planar Trailblazer. I was saying they got rid of all the Savannah lines, but now we got a bunch of brand new Savannah lines in the cube. I have only played with this card once. I was mightily impressed by it. I think I only activated the first ability a couple of times and never activated the second, but it feels like it's got some legs.
Yeah, I haven't had the ability to play with this yet, but I have played against it a few times, and I don't know if it was just matchups or whatever, but that was mostly a card I was happy my opponent played. It just didn't like pressure my life total very quickly, and it was very easy to interact with. but I'm not sure that's going to be representative. I do like the ability. The first activation, not like bolstering toughness at all, is a pretty big mark against it in my estimation. But again, I haven't played with it. I would probably lean towards probably play, but I don't know.
I am fine putting it in probably play because I do think I would like it. I like it less than Esper Sentinel, which we have in probably play right now. So
Yeah, I would fully defer on this one. I haven't seen played against or played with this card, so
I will say it if the card stays in the cube. I think long term the card might appraise for people because I think just the first ability doesn't do enough that people will invest the mana into it, but the second ability is so strong that if you start seeing it as like a 2 payment 5 mana ability, maybe it starts getting activated a little bit more.
Could be. I am not super confident that it's going to be able to get in very often. Like we said, the boards just become cluttered pretty quickly in the modern state of Vintage Cube. I'm not sure.
I think the fact that it doesn't gain any stats on the first activation is the main thing that holds it back in my mind, because it's just a 2/1, right? It's not hard to block. It's not hard to take off the board.
It is fair that it's if it gets killed in response to the second activation, then you've invested a lot of mana into nothing. So very fair. I'm fine with it staying towards the bottom end of probably play as we go on. I feel like we almost have bookends that could stay there for the rest, with
Right,
everything
yeah.
going in the middle. Ocelot Pride has to be towards the top of our list, right?
Oh yeah.
I think Ocelot Pride for me would be the first card that slots in between Mom and Giver. Yeah, I don't know that I would put it above Mother of Runes, but
I'm definitely happy with it in front of Giver. I'm without any synergy, without Guide of Souls, without anything else, I probably put it below Mom. But with anything that works with it in the deck, a Johnny Guide, anything that gains life, really, I think I'd put it above Mom. But
yeah, I think I agree with that. The only reason I would put it, the only reason I wanted to put it in this order, it was because of what, it's kind of situational, but there's so many cards that, keep in mind too that like it's not creature tokens, right? So like the clue producers, the treasure producers, all of those things also, they don't gain you life, but they synergize with the copy portion of this card. So
right, we'll get to several cards here in a bit with the 2-drops, where it feels like the 2-drops in aggro have transitioned to things that make tokens. So if you're able to get to the City's Blessing with Ocelot Pride, there's a lot to double. But I'm fine with it below Mom. I could see it moving up if the cube shifted a little bit more to make it even easier to trigger.
yeah,
Ragavan would be our next card to discuss.
Monkey.
So I think this one also is an always play. I do think it has gotten a bit worse since it was initially printed. It for much of the same reason that it's sometimes hard to get it through to actually connect, but triggering it once or maybe twice feels like it just puts you so far ahead that it's just a card I'm always going to play if I'm in the colors.
And I'm very happy with the dash ability. A lot of the time, just in the mid game, drawing it, using the dash ability to get in the same turn, or being able to not overcommit to the board if I think my opponent might be playing some board wipe. Like, it's very versatile and it does a lot when it hits. So the question is just where. I have to assume it's in our current top 3, but
I think I would put it behind Giver of Runes, personally.
That was kind of my thought too. I definitely want it over Figure of Destiny, but I'm not sure that I want it over Giver of Runes.
interesting. I will defer to your majority thought on that. I think
It's
would
so
put it
close.
over
Like,
Giver.
I think in either order you put them, they're like 3A and 3B right now. It's just so like so close. I do remember, this is incredibly anecdotal, but one of the first times I played with Ragavan, I was like unsure of the card, and then it was actually against you, Joey, I think. And I think there was a game where I think 3 or 4 turns in a row, Ragavan just flipped a card that would have killed it
Yes,
into
I've had that
exile,
experience
and
many
yeah.
times. I feel like I've never been hit with Ragavan and not had a removal spell flip off the top.
Yeah, that was the match that really sold it for me. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could see it above Giver for sure. I wouldn't be unhappy with that. My initial thought was just definitely above Figure of Destiny, and then I stopped thinking. So
And there's a chance my opinion of it is historical with those contexts, and Scott's right. It is easier and easier to block Ragavan as more and more value creatures get printed for every archetype.
Well, and at a certain point, the granularity kind of fades away, because if you're Boros Aggro and you have both of these cards in your pool, you're going to play them both. So it doesn't,
yeah,
it doesn't matter so much if it's like technically one spot above or below. They're both just very good.
Scott, you are so incorrect. We're gamers. We got to say things are definitively better than other things. It's our whole thing.
I'm trying to head off the comments that want to nitpick the details,
no.
because
the only
Get
other
after 'em.
caveat I would add is that if we are talking about from like a draft specific perspective, Ragavan definitely is a pick over Giver of Runes, because Ragavan is never wheeling, and Giver of Runes might.
That's fair. If we had made this tier list pick order, like pick priority, Ragavan would be higher than Giver for sure. But right now we're just talking about how much we like the cards in the deck once we've drafted them. And next card to talk about in that way is Thraben Inspector. I mentioned it. It's been in the cube for 5 years now. Almost 5. Yes, 5 years now. And I feel like it took a little while for me to come around on it, but I do really like the card now.
always play.
Yeah, this is another card that I think is, from what we have right now, near the end of Always Play, or the very top of Probably Play. But yeah, I'm totally fine putting it in Always Play.
I would play this over Figure every time.
See, I thought someone was going to say that. I'm fine putting it above Guide.
Did we put Guide at the bottom? Because I think, well, I don't want to backtrack us, so yeah, I think that's probably a fine spot.
I mean, if you feel like both of these should be above Figure, like I think I am maybe influencing us to keep Figure a little bit higher, but if you guys want us to move,
I think in a world where I have no artifact synergies, I would cut Thraben Inspector for Figure of Destiny or Guide of Souls. If I needed to cut a 1-drop, which rare, but
right. But as we were seeing, we're winding up with a lot of 1-drops up here. As predicted, like we usually want as many of them as possible, and we only have a couple of more to talk about. So I'm gonna quickly move us on while Figure keeps its good position to Usher of the Fallen. Usher, one of my favorite of the Savannah line effects. Like, this is a card I think I'm going to be higher on than either of you, because I think I would put it maybe right behind Ragavan, which seems high, but
That is
I really
higher
like
than I was
Usher.
going to go, yeah.
I
What were you
was
guys
actually considering slotting this as my first card in the combo play row. Not because I
Oh.
don't. It's weird because, when we make this tier list, I think it makes it look like I think combo play is like worse than the probably play cards, which I don't necessarily think is true with this one. So maybe it should just be a probably play. But I am so much more inclined to play this card if I have, a Guide of Souls, the artifact that gets
of the
counters.
Storyteller.
Yeah, Staff of the Storyteller. Anything like that.
Something that cares about the 1/1s.
That cares about the 1/1s, yeah. Because I just feel like a lot of the time, if you play turn 1 Guide of Souls, turn 2 attack, make a 1/1 go, your opponent is probably thrilled, right?
That's fair. I would feel that way.
But I don't want that to come across as that I think it's like bad. I just think I personally am way more inclined to play this card if I have something that it synergizes well with.
I think I kind of agree, but I just feel like there's so many of those cards in the cube that
Definitely.
It's always going to be, that checkbox is always going to be hit. We just added a new vehicle. We'll get to that in a little bit. You mentioned Staff, Smugglers, Copters in the cube. Like, there's just
Right.
There's enduring, whatever the white enduring creature is, like
Renewal,
just
I
glancing
think?
down at the list. There's so many of these that really care about the creature coming into play or having the 1/1 to crew the
Yeah,
vehicles.
Goblin Bombardment, Chainsaw,
Hmm.
just so many cards that. So maybe my statement can still be true and it still belongs in probably play, or even
My
like
pitch was
near.
going to be the top of probably play because I feel like I'm almost always going to put this card in my deck, but if I need to cut a 1-drop, it's probably one of the first ones I would cut.
So, Prose, are you okay putting it ahead of Esper Sentinel, or do you want to argue to have it behind?
I think so. I think those cards are equally cuttable, contingent on what else is in your deck. So
Yeah, we were talking about how close this gap is. I think this
yeah,
gap is also really close.
similarly close.
Uh, I have never come around on Voldaren Epicure. I'm not even sure if it's an aggro card. Maybe it's more of a reanimator card, but Voldaren Epicure, I think, is the only 1-drop I think I would suggest never play, but maybe I'm wrong. What are your all's thoughts?
I'm trying to think if there's relevant like discard stuff. I mean, not really. Delirium, I guess, if you have Dragon's Rage or something, if you're missing out. But
Detective's Phoenix is a thing too.
yeah,
And filtering in your aggro deck, not drawing too many lands in your aggro deck, like, is nice, but I don't
I
know.
personally think I would see this at the bottom of maybe play because I wouldn't be sad to have this card in my deck, but I wouldn't be thrilled about
You
it.
wouldn't be excited about it.
It's
Yeah.
hard for me to say that any 1-drops are unplayable in the red white aggro deck is maybe more what I'm getting at here, because like
That's what I was going to say, because when I said I feel like I want to put it in never play, if I only had 1 or 2 other 1-drops, this is still getting into the deck, I
right.
suppose. So, but at that point, I'm not feeling great about my aggro deck if I only have
Yeah, I
two,
mean,
2 or 3 other 1-drops.
right.
Well, it is also good with gut and broadside bombardiers, just like giving you more material to throw to. It's not a 0. It's a pretty low on the scale, but it's not a 0.
Maybe I'm being unfair because, like, this card is worse than Thraben Inspector for sure, but maybe it's not as much worse as I'm feeling like it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to pitch like a Flage or a Detective's Phoenix or something like that, obviously way better. But yeah, I agree. I think with the overall sentiment.
Scott mentioning Gut and Bombardier does make a huge difference. Like, if I have either of those in the draft, I'm definitely looking for more things that make extra game objects. Speaking of making extra game objects, a Johnny. I think we're starting 2s off really hot because I want to put this very high.
Yeah, I was sitting here deciding if I wanted to suggest putting it above Mother of Runes or not. I mean, if I'm looking at pack one, pick one, and the cards in it are Mother of Runes and a Johnny, I think I'm taking a Johnny personally.
Yeah, but again, that's because that card will never wheel, and Mother of Runes sometimes wheels.
Well, I mean, I think that wasn't really how I was thinking of it. I think I would be, if I take a Johnny and Mom doesn't wheel, I'm happy. If I take Mom, a Johnny is never wheeling, but if I take Mom and don't get a Johnny, I'm slightly less happy, I feel, but that might also just be recency bias. So it is pretty hard to unseat Mother of Runes as just the top of the pile.
If you have no way to ensure that your Johnny's flipping, then I don't think it's better than Mother of Runes. If that's fully within your opponent's control.
Right, if it's essentially a 2-mana 2/1 unblockable because your opponent just will never block the cat token, that's not good enough to be above Mother of Runes here.
Right.
But if you can flip it, it's just so powerful.
Yeah, well, and I do think it is, baseline pretty pushed. I do think it is at home right there in the number 2 spot. But I don't know that we're gonna unseat Mother of Runes with
right
anything. Maybe we'll have
nothing
to see
that I'm
the
seeing on
tier
this
list.
list right now, but
Right. A Johnny has maybe not quite enough things that boost it in the rest of the cube, like mentioning modern again, Ocelot, Prada, Johnny, well known. I think our only other cat is maybe Lion Sash. So it's not like there's a lot of other cats that you're going to have to trigger it if for some reason you don't have the cat token, if it gets blinked or whatever. And speaking of blink, like Johnny's very good if you can blink it, just making more tokens, and there's a few of those in the cube, not like the number that I would consider critical to consider that a key synergy with the Johnny. Continuing on with the Modern Horizons cards, Amped Raptor would be our next card to discuss.
This is another card that I have not gotten the opportunity to draft with since it was added, or at least when we did, it didn't come up. I have a hard time thinking that it is as good in Cube as it is in Modern. Was in Modern, I should say. But because unlike Guide of Souls, you really need a Guide of Souls is a consistent source of energy. But unlike Guide of Souls, this card only makes energy when it enters, right? So it can't really function long term on its own.
Only if it enters, and it can only cast the. It can only exile to cast a spell if it was cast from your hand. So blinking it does not. Blinking it gives you more energy, but it wouldn't redo the value part of it. But I mean, it's a 2-mana, 2-power first strike creature that is going to cast another spell the majority of the time. Like it really comes down to what percentage of your deck costs 2 or less if you're running it without any other energy stuff. Scott, do you have thoughts on where you might place it? Because I feel like I'm going to throw a curveball with my idea after.
This is another one that I haven't had a ton of personal experience with. It reads pretty solid to me, but I also a lot of your higher impact cards do cost more than that. You know, your solitudes and whatnot, even if you're not actually spending 5 mana on that card. I would be inclined to put it probably somewhere in probably play because there's not like a lot of ways for it to go wrong, you know? It's 2 mana, 2 power, first strike, and maybe you get a free card off of it. Like, it seems pretty good.
It is worth maybe noting that those cards are gone forever. So if you do flip like your Solitude or something, it's not like you get it after that. It's just gone. But yeah, I think I still think this is somewhere in the probably play range for me.
Yeah, I think where it is in here is determined by the percentage of your deck that costs 2 or less. If you're hitting 50% of the time, I would maybe put it a little bit higher. If you're hitting less than a third of the time, I'd put it lower. The place I was considering putting it is combo play, because this card's a 10 out of 10 all-star if you've drafted a deck that is companioning Lurrus. I don't think it's actually possible to build an aggro deck that companions Lurrus.
It's tough.
Currently, the 3-drops are just so good. The 3s and 4s are so good.
Recent updates have added a lot of, there was Guide of Souls, but now there's Galvanic Discharge, there's Static Prison. There is a bit more energy than there was before, but, maybe not enough still to make it, the bannable card that it was in Modern.
I'm happy to leave it where it is. If I thought it was more likely that aggro Lurrus companion could be a thing, I think I would put it in combo play, because that would be the way I think of the card at that point. But I think I'm fine leaving it there. I placed it above Kellen. Are you guys fine with that placement?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Cathar Commandos, our next one to talk about, and I'm a big fan of Cathar Commando.
Yep, same. I think it would always make my deck. It's not gonna like outright win any games by itself, except for like extremely rare circumstances. But it being a flash threat is huge. Having some main deck interaction for artifacts and enchantments is huge. Like I just like everything about this card.
So I think left to my own devices, I would put it somewhere around Guide of Souls. I don't know how you guys feel about that positioning. Should it be lower than Thraben Inspector? Higher?
I think
I
I
don't
could
want to go
buy.
much higher than that.
Yeah, I think I can buy higher than Thraben Inspector. Guide of Souls, I'm not entirely sure though that I would put it above that.
Right, there are a lot of 2-drops, so I think the comparative value of Cathar Commando is maybe lower than just the density of 1-drops you want to play versus the density of 2-drops you want to play. I can see that putting Guide of Souls higher than Cathar Commando.
The effect that this card can have on an early game, just like I don't think you can overstate it, because like in any world where you play a red or white 1-drop and then pass on turn 2 with 2 mana up, your opponent's going to be playing around Mana Tithe, and like whether you have it or not, being able to do that and then cast this thing, or cast your Mana Tithe, I mean it could just warp games way more than I think you would expect from looking at it on first glance.
Right. There's a surprising amount of different interaction that aggro has the option of now, and I think that continues with our next card, another flash threat, Containment Priest. I feel like once upon a time this was only a sideboard card for me, but unless I'm hurting myself at any point, like if I have a blink effect in my deck, I definitely won't main deck Containment Priest, but do you guys see it as a main deck card, or is it still just in the sideboard?
Well, like you said, if I have like a number of blink effects that I want to use on my own cards, I would think twice about this. But if that's not the case, I am probably going to main deck this every time. I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I mean, I would put it near the bottom of always play, only because in a lot of matchups, it's just the first card that you sideboard out. But I do think that having it in your initial 40 is basically always correct.
Well, and you have ways to blink your opponent's creatures too, which it's even in the matchups where it's not just like KOing their entire strategy. I still think you have to put some work in, but it can be quite good
Yeah.
on the offensive too. Like I was going to suggest putting it over Figure of Destiny even because some of those matchups it is just a game breaker if they can't deal with it. Their entire strategy doesn't function. But the ability to also pair it with your cards to like combo kill your opponent's permanents, I think it's fantastic. I would love to start it in every white aggressive deck.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that Felia and Flicker Wisp, the two main flicker effects, can flicker your opponent's stuff as well, and that can be devastating for
Parallax Wave, Static Prism.
Oh, Parallax Wave. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys
talked
convinced
me into it. Yeah.
You're also good for above figure.
Yeah. I mean, it is semi-conditional, but there's just so many conditions that just it belongs there. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like a hot take when you said it, but you won us over. So, moving on to Fear of Missing Out. I love Fear of Missing Out. It's a card that I've played. It hasn't been out that long, but I played it in several modern tournaments already, and Cube just doesn't feel like the place for Delirium to me.
I think I would put this card right next to Dragon's Rage Channeler. Above or below it doesn't really make a difference for me, but I think it has the same exact issue where, when it's on, it is on. But the card draw is nice when you play it, but so many times that's just the extent of what you get from this card, in the aggro deck at least.
Right. The fact that discard could help build you towards Delirium, I think puts it over Channeler for me.
Yeah, I agree with that placement for exactly that reason. Like, yeah, if you can reliably turn on Delirium somehow, then it's a way better threat. But assuming that's not going to be the case, it is a card that I would play sometimes, but would be happy to cut it as well.
Moving on to Generous Plunderer, I think that I overvalue this card because I always forget that it has Menace, and I always get got by the fact that it has Menace. So I feel like it beats me worse than it should sometimes, but
I mean, I personally think this is a top of probably play or bottom of always play card. Probably more top of probably play. It is a 2-drop. Doesn't have haste. Doesn't do anything when it comes into play.
I am fine with either of those positions. If Scott, you want to make the call on, if you are in agreement and want to make the call on top of probably or bottom of always.
Yeah, I am in agreement. I was going to go top of probably even before Prose said that. So
Yeah, I think that's probably better. Mostly just because if you play it and it dies, it does absolutely nothing, right? No comes into play effect. Nothing happens when it dies. It doesn't have haste, so
For sure. Its value is a little bit slower than some of the other 2-drops have, but getting to swing in for essentially 3 damage menace. Also, in Vintage Cube, your opponent usually has artifacts, so sometimes it's 4 or 5 damage menace, and then give you a mana for your second main phase. Like, this is a 2-drop that I like in the mid to late game, where it's like it will be attacking on what will maybe be the final turn of the game, giving you a mana boost and a damage boost with it. So I like its versatility as a 2-drop in that point. I think some of the others have less staying power, but I'm fine with it at the top of probably. Glimmerlands is our next one. Not technically a creature, but it's a 2-mana card that comes into play, makes a creature. So we're going to talk about it here with the creatures. To me, we talked about the value of 1-drops. I'm not interested in playing aggro that frequently if I don't have a lot of 1-drops. So I feel like confidently this is a 2-mana 2/2 that if I cast on turn 2, I've probably played a 1-mana card on turn 1, and then it's a 2-mana 2/2 that draws a card, and I can re-equip it if something happens to the creature. Like, to me, saying all that out loud and it being an artifact and artifacts sometimes mattering, like, that makes me want to put it above Generous Plunder, which I wouldn't have thought 2 minutes ago.
I think it's good above Generous Plunder. It also is a little bit better if you have some blink effects like Ophelia. I think it's quite good, yeah.
The token it makes is also a rebel creature, which I believe matters for Othari, so it has synergy there as well. To me, I can't imagine an aggro deck where I'm not playing this card, especially like tokens matter stuff. We talked about Ocelot, Pride, like, I'm fine with it. I think I personally would have it above Thraben Inspector. I'll allow you guys to talk me out of that, though, if you think it should be below it.
Urban Inspector probably draws a card more often than Glimmerlands does, so it should be above Glimmerlands.
I think that's a fair assessment.
I really expected pushback there, but okay.
I think I am lower on this card than you guys are, but all of the points you're making I think are very valid. So, assuming you're curving out, this card is great.
I agree that Inspector draws 1 card more than Glimmerlands, but I am very confident Glimmerlands draws 2 cards more often than Thraben Inspector.
Probably. I also think there's value in, we haven't gotten to Stoneforge Mystic yet, but these cards that are good on their own, but also if you have Stoneforge Mystic in your deck, you can just put them into play at instant speed is nice. It's an artifact for the the delirium creatures. It's card advantage.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 cards that care about tokens. There's a card that cares about rebels. There's a couple cards that care about artifacts. There's a couple cards that care about equipment. Like, it just synergizes so in a way with so many of the cards that I think that's why I have it so high. But again, I value having the 1-drops. Like, I don't want this card if I don't have a bunch of 1-drops. Don't want to be an aggro if I don't have a bunch of 1-drops. But for that reason, I will allow Thraben Inspector, which I think the problem is I'm low on Thraben Inspector and I'm high on Glimmerlands, so yeah. I'm fine leaving it where it is.
Yep.
Goblin Crater Maker is our next card. What are your all's thoughts on Crater Maker?
Would maybe play it. It's one of the 2-drops that, when I'm looking to make my last cuts or whatever, that's an easy one that, it offers a bit of utility here and there in specific board states, but it's not something I'm like attached to. If it makes its way into my 45 cards, I'm fine leaving it in the sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a bad card to have in your main deck, but it's a very easy card to cut if you have 41 cards in your deck. I mean, you can just compare it to Cathar Commando, and it's strictly worse in almost every way except for toughness. But
Right. We talked about how every deck is getting more value cards and being able to kill an important creature your opponents have. Maybe the 2 damage matters, but I, I agree. To me, it's almost more of a sideboard card. I agree. It is probably the last playable a lot of the time that makes the deck or gets cut at the end. So I think I would settle into it at the end of maybe play, and it's hard
yeah,
to imagine anything goes further right than it. I would have said Voldar and Epicure at the start of the thing, but again, Scott even mentioning Bombardiers makes me leave this above it. Inti is the next card we're going to talk about. Another one that I usually forget some part of. This time it's the fact that it gives the creature trample. I've been hit by a Ragavan that's been given trample through my chump block 2 times, and that feels like a lot for that to happen to me on accident. So
not a lot, but weird that it's happened twice. So
yeah, this is another discard card. We've talked about discard several times. I don't feel like there's any real synergy to it besides if you do have the delirium cards, you get to kind of control, take the delirium into your own hands. But
yeah, I mean, we've mentioned the few, Detectives Phoenix, the Scrap Heap Scrounger, the few cards that have a bit of play there, but overall, not a ton.
yeah, it's not pronounced enough for me to really love this card. It does kind of meet your criteria you mentioned earlier of doing something when it comes into play. You still have to go to the beginning of combat, or actually to declare attackers, but it does do something there. And I guess it is its own discard payoff card by exiling stuff. So if you have the other cards that discard stuff, like if you have the Fear of Missing Out and Voldar and Epicure, this card definitely gets better. But to me, I think this is towards the bottom of probably play or the top of maybe play.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. I mean, a year ago I would have had this card much higher, but even in that time span, there's just been so much stuff that's gone in to change that. And
Yeah, in this archetype specifically, I that's where I have it, about that range. I do think this card is much better in other archetypes, but in Boros Aggro, where you don't have many, if any, synergies with the discarding, it's great if you're flooded and you can turn those lands into hopefully more action, but it's not something that I'm like first picking and I'm super excited about.
yep,
Okay, I'm gonna plant it at the top of maybe play because I definitely do like it more than the new Goblin. But uh, moving to a card that from a card I think I maybe undervalue to a card I think I overvalue, Intrepid Adversary. I really highly value this card. I think I'd put it somewhere in the middle of our always play category, but
Oh, that is higher than I
I
thought
think
you were
that
going
is an
to
insane place to put that card.
go.
okay, I knew that was going to be the case. I knew that.
I also think I am higher on this card than I should be, but I think a lot of that is because this card was a lot better in cubes 2 or 3 years ago than it is now. Uh, I don't know. I definitely don't think it belongs in always play. I could see it near the bottom of probably play, I think, but
Oh, see, we fully differ on this. I was going to put it at the top of probably play in that, like, assuming I am more white than I am red, I'm like probably going to put this card in my deck every time. But it's one of those cards that like doesn't really help if you're behind. When it works, it feels great. But I would probably play this more often than I wouldn't.
yeah, I think that's fair.
Where did you say you would put it, Prose?
I said near the bottom of probably play, but I think I may have overshot.
Interesting. So it sounds like we're averaging out, even though it's a pretty wide range. It sounds like we're averaging out towards the top of probably play. I will admit something Scott mentioned there. If I'm majority white, I do feel like aggro decks are tending more towards being heavily red. That's something I've observed looking through our deck list. There's definitely ones that do skew more white, but I do agree that probably hurts the playability of the card if you do end up on 4 or even 6 mana if you somehow don't have the correct white pips for it. And I think the card has maybe gotten a little bit worse just comparative to 4-drops. I think 4-drops used to be a bit of a weak slot. Like, it feels like Hellrider came out before other good 4-drops maybe went in, because Headliner Scarlet, Pyrogoyf, like, we're going to get to these 4-drops later on, but as I look down at these 4-drops, I'm like, I do want to cast all of these more than I want to cast a 4-mana Intrepid Adversary, and maybe that means it's lower than I think it is, way up here.
Yeah, I feel like over the past year, I've both played against and played this card in a few decks, and I would say that 90% of the time this card sees play, it's a 3-1 with lifelink, and that's it. That's all the text the card has. Because, like you said, there's a lot more top end now that you would just rather cast. And I think a lot of the times when this card is like stellar, you're just winning anyways. Because you just have, a bunch of creatures or something. So I think it's very fine to put here. I do think that it is worse than it used to be. That's all.
Yeah, when I put the card in my deck, I put it in the 4-drop slot and consider it just like a bonus that it could be cast at 2 mana if my curve requires it. But I guess if I'm doing that, I have to be thinking about it in comparison to the other 4-drops where I think it's below most of them. So I still, that versatility makes me want to put it high, so I'm content with the top of probably play. But moving on to the next card, another new card, one from the Jumpstart set. Iovora Insatiable Air has trample, and when it enters or deals combat damage, create a blood token. So another discard effect, and it has its own discard synergy. So I guess it and Inti give you things for if you're stacking a bunch of discard effects. Maybe it is slowly becoming more of a supported archetype, just to have aggro with a bunch of these discard synergy cards. It starting out as a 1/1 just feels so low. Trample is also just like an irrelevant keyword until you've already, like, so if you play this on 2, attack with it, it has to deal combat damage to make the second blood token. So it's attacking as a 2/2 because you can sack the first blood token. It has to deal damage before you can pump it up to a 3/3 if you don't have other discard stuff. I feel like I'd put it further down in maybe play.
Maybe it would be more accurate for me to say that I think Inti is the ceiling on this card, and I could see it pretty much anywhere below that.
Yeah, I'm content to put it kind of low into maybe play, honestly.
I think it's definitely better than Voldar and Epicure.
The fact that Voldar and Epicure is at least a 1-drop made me want to put it below it. I think the two are very close. So I'm fine putting it above it, and because I'm not excited to play either of these cards.
Yeah, and opinion may change if I ever cast this card or get beat up by it, but as is, I don't really have a formed opinion on it. And like you said, there are plenty of cards that seem to combo with the fear of missing out. Inti, Voldar and Epicure makes a blood token, so it's possible that this card is just better than any of us are thinking, but
yeah, I just wish it didn't start out as a 1/1. That feels too low. Like, if it started out as a 2/2, I'd be very high on the card, but it starting out as a 1/1 is just such a big difference, obviously. Moving on to our next card, Kari Zev. I've always been medium on this card. I feel like since it's come out, my opinion hasn't changed, and that feels incorrect. But
I think that feels incorrect only because I think that it has gotten worse since then, and I feel like your opinion should reflect that. But I don't like this card. I was surprised when they put it back into the cube list.
Yeah, where did that come from?
I don't know. It was gone for a while, I believe, and then it came back, and I don't remember when or why, but I don't like this card.
maybe having Secure, Tron Squadron, Staff of the Storyteller, like these token synergies that we've been talking about, maybe that makes the token that it produces more valuable. But I think we've talked about several cards already, and we'll talk about more that just do that better. To me, I think it goes... I think we're all lukewarm on it enough that it goes around the same area. I think I like it more than the Vampire. I think I like it more than Dragon Rage's Channeler.
Yeah, I'm fine with right above DRC. It still attacks for 3 damage, and it's hard to block the Carry Zev itself.
Yeah.
It's not like impressive or whatever, but I've played it to like fill out the curve, and it attacks, so it's not terrible, but I don't think it goes much higher than this.
The next card is Lion Sash. I think I'm low on this card.
Put it on the list somewhere. Low. How low are you?
I think it's low enough for me that if I don't have Stoneforge Mystic in my deck, this is in the sideboard to play against decks that care about graveyards. So for that reason, maybe I put it in combo play. Maybe we end up with a couple of equipments that we obviously wouldn't play without Stoneforge. Obviously, the bigger ones will probably end up there, but to me, I think without Stoneforge, I'm not starting this in my deck.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
I think if you ask me, if we're putting Containment Priest and Cathar Commando in always play, I think that this at least probably belongs near the bottom of probably play. It doesn't, it does require things in the graveyard to eat, which is a downside, but even if the worst thing that you're doing is just eating fetch lands, this thing gets big and equips to something else. And there's so many strategies now that care about cards in their graveyard, whether it's, a control deck who wants to play Snapcaster Mage or Reanimator deck or a deck with Delirium or, something like that. That I don't know that I would only play this with Stoneforge Mystic in my deck.
I can be won over to the bottom of probably play. Even though I think, as we discussed, Kellen, even I was kind of cooled on it, I still think I would put it below Kellen.
I would even be fine with the top of maybe play, I think. I don't think that Stoneforge Mystic is a requirement to play this card.
I'm more excited about an Inti than I am.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I'm just wrong actually now that I'm looking at it,
Well, I just suggested one slot lower than you did, so I don't know.
I also don't know. Like, we're not looking at the numbers of the whole queue. Maybe if we counted up the exact graveyard synergies of different archetypes, maybe we would end up putting this higher just because of value it gets in some percentage of the matchups. But I'm actually think I'm going to side with Prose here and put it above Inti because I just don't like Inti.
Okay, fair enough.
Another card that cares about +1/+1 counters, Luminarch Aspirant.
I think this card definitely belongs in always play. I'm not sure where it belongs in always play.
My initial impression is somewhere around Containment Priest.
I think I agree with that as well.
Oh, very brave of you, picking the very middle card of always play as your basis. Yeah, I think that's probably about right, though.
I mean, I say somewhere around. I think the margin I have for that is pretty wide, because I actually think if I have plenty of 1-drops, like, these are cards that are always going to make our deck, but if I have plenty of 1-drops, I think I'm more excited to have this in my deck than I'm excited to have Ragavan in my deck. Like, I'd put this above Ragavan, maybe.
But this is good with Ragavan.
It's good with Ragavan. Like, for sure,
I get what
they're
you're
both
saying,
always
though.
in the deck, but I think Aspirant's just so good.
Yeah, I mean, Aspirant makes every single 1-drop in your deck just better. So yeah. I think that's probably a valid spot for it, just right above Ragavan or right below Ragavan. Either way, I think is...
Yeah, I was fine with it. The reason I pointed out Containment Priest is because while I think maybe I like it more than Ragavan, I could also understand just what we've been talking about, the value of the 1-drops if we ended up putting it lower than Guide, just because the 1-drops are so important. Scott, are you okay with us putting it that high, or?
Yeah, no, I think that's about right, honestly. I may have made it, a spot or two lower, but I'm not trying to quibble about that.
Okay. We've been talking about Blink a fair bit. the new Blink card that makes us feel consistent about things, Felia, another flash creature in white, so our third flash 2-drop, and Felia's got to be really high, especially with all the synergies we've been talking about, right?
Yeah, I was going to suggest above Giver of Runes.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. I mean, it's definitely Containment Priest is my floor for this card because they're both 2-drops with flash, and I think Felia is significantly better.
And the two are great together, as Scott pointed out.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I think above Giver is probably correct.
Yeah, and I think if anyone bulks at that ranking, you just have not seen or played with Felia enough, because the amount of things it will just randomly do in a game that are so good, it continually impresses. And the card's been out for a while now, and I'm still like constantly being impressed by it. So it is really good.
Yeah, we talked about all the tokens being made in this deck. That is not this archetype specific. That is true across the board in Vintage. It feels lots of tokens popping up, token copies of things popping up, and Felia just being a removal spell for those while still being a creature that's attacking is huge. So cards get stolen sometimes, getting to blink them and then put them back into play under your control, maybe.
Also, another card that makes the Intrepid Adversary that I'm down on a lot better. So just get to cast that thing as a 2-drop and then blink it later on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if you hadn't said higher than Giver, I would not have put it higher than Giver, but I would have put it maybe 1 or 2 cards lower. Again, like not a huge difference.
I think with most of these cards, I think with the exception of like Mother of Runes, and I do think there's a pretty significant drop off after Containment Priest in this top row. I think with the exception of those 2 cards, I think everything is pretty fluid with the cards around it.
Our next card to talk about is Magda, original Magda. Maybe I should clarify. So, looking at Magda, I am not a huge fan of this card. I'm a little surprised a 2-mana 2/1 is still in the cube, even though it has decent upside of making a treasure when it attacks.
Yeah, I don't think this card is above like the middle of maybe play at best.
That's about where I have it as well. I do. It is slightly better the more like busted 4-drops you get, because even if you're suiciding that in on turn 3 just to play a busted card a turn earlier, like that is good. Like if it's just a Lotus Petal,
Right.
but that that depends on the exact cards you drafted and all kinds of like gameplay specific questions. I do think it is not that impressive in that many games, so I don't disagree with the placement. It does do some stuff that's good.
Yeah, and it's not for nothing that, if you are a red-white deck with Stoneforge Mystic and, big dumb equipments in your deck, that this is another way to potentially get those out. It's not like treasures are particularly hard to come by. Kind of hard to accumulate, usually, because you probably want to be, spending them in this style of deck, but...
I do also want to mention, I don't think its synergy with mounts and vehicles really matters that much, because A, there's not that many mounts and vehicles, because it saddles the mounts or vehicles creating a treasure, but that's just too small of a value, being a creature that crews the vehicles and makes a treasure. Like, truthfully, I feel like maybe we underranked Goblin Crater Maker, because I like this card more than Goblin Crater Maker, but I kind of agree of putting it in the middle. Besides that, I don't know. To me, it's definitely lower than Karizev. I think it's lower than DRC.
Yeah, those 2 cards are probably the closest comparisons. I think I would put it slightly over both of them, but I think it's just such a small margin that anywhere in there I'm happy with.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Phyrexian Revoker is our next card to talk about. Again, this one kind of depends on the overall number of things it hits in the queue, but I think it's got something to name in most games. And especially if you're paying attention in the draft, you know what cards went around the table. You can kind of guess what's in a lot of opponents' decks, even if you're not watching the other rounds. So to me, it's easy for me to cut if I need to cut a card, but it's still probably at the bottom of probably play or top of maybe play.
Yeah, I think even with the fact that it always hits something, the question just becomes like how impactful is that in a lot of situations. Like there's obviously cards that it's game breaking if you can name it, but I think a lot of times if you're specking in game one on a card your opponent has that's not even in play. Obviously if you get to shut off something like a Planeswalker that is in play, that could be a big game, but I'm kind of in the same boat where like I think I would prefer this card to always be in my sideboard, but I wouldn't be like distraught if I ended up starting it.
I don't think that I'm correct in doing this, but me personally, this is fully a sideboard play. I think my deck is in a pretty bad spot if I'm main decking this. And again, I don't think that is defensible, but that's how I typically play it. So
I'm not far above that. I mean, I think something has to go fairly wrong in your draft for this to be in your 23 or 24 best cards.
I think when I look at the 1 and 2 drops out of aggro, I'm maybe overvaluing ease of casting it because the color requirements can be so extreme on some cards. I can be won over to it being a sideboard card that maybe comes in most of the time because just once you've seen the deck in game 1, you then know what to name in 2 and 3. So for that reason, I want to put it at the top of sideboard play.
Yeah, I mean, especially we haven't gotten to the spells yet, but there's cards like Flame Slash and Galvanic Discharge that only hit creatures. So if you're starting those, I mean, you want to sideboard those out 99% of the time against certain decks. So being able to bring in a card like Revoker is very good there. But yeah, I don't know.
So our next card is Robber of the Rich. I don't feel like I've ever been that impressed by this card, but it has been decent against me in the past, so maybe I'm undervaluing it during the drafts where I see it.
it's a probably play for me. It's another one of those like curve filling 2-drops that sometimes it's like very, very good, and sometimes it's just a 2/2 with haste.
Right.
And reach for some reason. So
Right. Well, because it's Robin Hood.
yeah, okay.
Listen, man, they didn't give Orcish Bowmasters reach, so that argument is out the window.
Yeah, but he's such a good shot. Let's put it at the bottom of probably play, I think, unless either of you wants to push it up.
Nope, I think that's fine.
So we've talked a lot about discard and how there's kind of just incidental discard. I think that puts Scrap Heap Scrounger higher than I would have put it at the beginning of these rankings, but I'm still pretty low on Scrounger, even with the value of being able to discard it and then get it back for a turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in never play territory for this one.
Interesting.
I think it would take a lot for me to super want that card in this archetype. I think that card is really good in a lot of other decks, but I know it falls into this deck's colors, and I mean, I guess maybe I wouldn't be like super sad if I'm playing it if I have like Evora or Inti in my deck also, but like
You could talk me into a combo play. Like if we are building the Boros Aggro discard theme deck, then sure I'll play this. But
the issue I have with that is it's the value of it is just so low of 2 mana to come back and attack once for 2 power. Like,
well, it also discards another card, right? So
true. So if you have either of the 2 cards that get a benefit off of that.
So I mean, it's not 0. I don't know that it's enough to justify calling it a combo play. Really, I think it's more like a value.
And if I had both of these 2 drops in my deck already, and presumably some of the other 2 drops that we actually think are good, are we going to make room for another 2 drop? Obviously, it's not going to get played on turn 2 because it's going to be a later game thing. Or it's going to, yeah.
Nah, it stinks. Never play.
Okay. Securitron Squadron. Maybe this is what I want Intrepid Adversary to be in the modern day, because this cares about tokens. Its scaling is better.
Scaling is better, but the cost is worse. It does fare a little bit better, I think, because it's fighting with 5 drops instead of 4 drops. But
And maybe you're right, because I feel like I was initially thinking of it high, but when I'm thinking about it high, it's because I've seen people do a gross number of these, which means I must only be thinking about artifact decks, watching them play. So maybe it is for aggro a bit lower. Though the fact that it pumps all creature tokens,
only when
we're
they
making
enter,
a lot
though.
of those.
Not while they're already made, which is part of the reason that I think that, I know we've said this for like 4 cards now, but this might be a good card for me to argue for combo play for, because I don't think you're playing this card unless you have like Ocelot Pride or Johnny or a very consistent source of tokens.
I'm immediately on board with that.
Yeah, because as is, I mean, you can pay 5 mana for it. You get a 2/2 and a 3/3 with Vigilance, and then if you do happen to make more tokens, it's fine. But like, if you're not consistently making tokens, I think it's just not.
Yeah,
Super
you just said a
impressive.
lot of if statements.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm fine with this in combo play. I think that we're in the combo play or never play kind of territory. I mean, it may not be quite that drastic, but I'm not thrilled about this one in my aggressive strategy.
Yeah, I mean, the world where you go turn 1 Ocelot Pride, turn 2 this, and just like make a 2/2 cat is a wonderful world to live in. But
oh yeah,
there's almost no other 1-drop that I would want to follow this up with on turn 2. So
Okay, are you guys ready?
yep. That's too high. That's
Listen,
too high. I mean, I like Selfless Spirit. That is too high.
I understand that being the opinions. Prose.
it's too high, man.
For sure.
It's an onboard trick. It's not instant speed. It's a face-up card. There's less and less sweepers as time goes on, which like it does force your opponent to make a play that they know is going to be bad sometimes, but like that's still at their like discretion, right?
For sure. I feel like there have been times when this card has been in play and it has given me the same dread as Mother of Runes. Like your creatures being able to attack with impunity, because you could just sack this and probably trade up a lot of board states. The fact that the first piece of removal has to be targeted at it, and depending on if it's sorcery speed or instant speed, your secondary removal maybe has to wait a turn cycle.
I do think it belongs in always play. I just don't think I would put it above Ocelot Pride.
I agree, and I still think it's too high. I would probably put it down near the bottom end. The exact placement, it's also very good with Luris, which I don't think I mentioned. But it's another one of those cards that, like, sometimes it's just a 2-mana, 2-power flyer, which is not bad. And it's even better if your cube has a bunch of initiative cards. It's a good evasive creature for that. But as it is, it's just, you need a lot of things to go right for it to be impressive in this day and age. So I'll always put this in my deck. It doesn't compete with the cards that are above it, really.
Okay. This is the position I'm now going to try to get you guys on. I feel like I would be willing to go up to 2 positions lower. I really think I like it more than 3 Inspector, but
yeah, like I said before, I think, and it still holds true, that there's kind of a canyon between Containment Priest and Figure of Destiny here, and I'm indifferent of the order of all of those cards that are below Containment Priest at this point.
So I can maybe sneak it up here, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you can sneak it up there.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll allow it.
Okay. The next card we need to talk about is another newer card, Skyseer's Chariot. It has crew 2, which I was mistaken about earlier. I said something earlier that was based on me thinking it was crew 1. It's a 3/3 vehicle that as it enters it pithing needles essentially. No, activated abilities of the sources of the chosen name cost 2 more to activate. As you can tell, I have not played with this card yet. I am a fan of the vehicles in general in aggro, the way their play pattern kind of works.
Yeah, I think if we'd had this conversation before the last time that I was at a Cube Day, I would have ranked this card low. But last time we were at a Cube Day, I played a turn 1 Birds of Paradise, and my opponent played this and named my Birds of Paradise, and it ruined my day. So
It does seem pretty good. I have not played with it either. So going on instinct here, I imagine I'm probably gonna always play this. Is that true?
I don't want to like blur the lines too much, but Smuggler's Copter is the next card in the list, and I think that I would put these two cards exactly next to each other. So wherever you would put Smuggler's Copter, I think this belongs probably below it because it has a color casting component. The crew is more expensive.
Yeah, the crew being more expensive is the reason why I was going to put this lower than I want to put Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah. I think it belongs below Smuggler's Copter, but I think as 2-drop 3/3 vehicles, I would put these cards pretty close together. Mostly I just said that because I think maybe I'm the only person who's played with or against this card, and so I wanted you guys to use your gauge of where you thought Smuggler's Copter might belong, because I think they belong in a similar...
So I feel like for me, this card feels like it ends up in the middle of probably play. It kind of comes down to how many 2-power creatures I have in my deck that I don't mind not attacking with. Whereas Smuggler's Copter, I think I will have plenty of 1-drop creatures I don't mind attacking with, the Thraben Inspectors, the Esper Sentinels. So for me, Smuggler's Copter, I find it hard to imagine a build of aggro where it isn't in my deck. Whereas this card, I feel I'm more likely to not play. So this is where I think I would put it. I actually felt like this was a pretty big gulf, again, between Esper Sentinel and Amped Raptor, and I feel like it fits somewhere in that large canyon for me.
Yep, that's fair.
I'm fine with that there, with the caveat that after I play a few matches with it, I may have regretted it being as low as it is.
Yeah, me putting that there makes me think these ended up too high, even though I was the one arguing for both these cards to be high, because I think it is pretty close to these. Smuggler's Copter, you already mentioned it. I talked about why I think it's higher. For me, it's...
I didn't mean that statement as trying to drag Smuggler's Copter down. I think lower always play or high probably play is correct here. I just mostly just included that to where my frame of reference was.
I would Smuggler's Copter a bit higher than that. I would put it, I think, right after Giver Runes. I think it's an incredible card. Right after it.
There's no way. You're happy to play this. Obviously, you're going to play both of them, but...
I don't think I would want to have Smuggler's Copter over Ragavan or Intrepid Adversary, personally.
Not Adversary.
Sorry, Luminarch Aspirant.
Yeah, Luminarch Aspirant's just so powerful. I think I would have this card closer to the end. I would definitely have it in Always Play, but I think I would have it closer to the end.
I don't really want to go below Selfless Spirit.
I think, what if we put it right there, right above Containment Priest?
Right above Containment Priest?
I keep coming back to this, tiers within tiers that I've built in my head. I do think it belongs in the same tier as the rest of those cards up to Mother of Runes. I don't think it's significantly better or worse than Containment Priest, but I do think it's very, very good.
Yeah, you're just always gonna... I shouldn't say always. Almost always gonna have one of these 1-power creatures that isn't attacking. The Ocelot tokens, the Thraben Inspector. So it's just so good. And it discards a card.
Yeah, discards cards, more importantly, draws cards. Also, when it blocks, which, has flying, there's not a ton of flying blocking if you need that here, but...
Dang, I feel like I used my one time on Selfless Spirit. But I'm gonna say, what if?
Stop.
What if? No.
Stop.
Bad.
It's not
Okay.
even in always play, I don't think.
It's not even in always play?
I don't think it's an always play. I think there's a lot of decks where you will pay 2 mana and then pay a white and draw a card, and this card will never do something again.
So, like, it feels like half the cards in aggro make tokens.
But this card requires creature tokens, right? Yeah, this card specifically requires creature tokens, which is a thing that I once made the same statement about it and was corrected that it requires creature tokens, and it knocked it down a few pegs in my book.
I still think not having it always play is crazy.
I mean, I think this card is always play in a lot of decks. I don't know that it's always play in this deck, though. It's close.
I understand we put Squadron in combo play because you want to have a lot of token cards, but as long as I have 2 or 3 other token cards that make creature tokens, I guess, like...
I mean, I'm not gonna like push too hard against always play. Like I think that I end up cutting this card from more of these decks than I end up playing it in. But if you feel strongly that you would play it more often, then put it up there.
Maybe there are fewer... Ooh, God. Maybe there are fewer things that make creature tokens than I was initially thinking. I mean, there's still a lot of them, but...
And there's a lot more consistent ones. So maybe this card has gotten better with some recent additions. You know, they've put like Hero of Blade Hold, the White Overlord is here now.
I feel like I'm going to put it with my other...
Yeah, that's
maybe
fine.
too high, 2-drop artifact.
I can live with this.
Stoneforge Mystic. So I think we're going to end up with some equipment in combo play, but I think you're a lock to always get some kind of equipment. So I feel like we should put Stoneforge wherever we think it, plus high quality equipment, would rank. I don't know where that is for me.
My argument for this was going to be to put Stoneforge Mystic, Batter Skull, and Cauldron Complete all together in combo play, because I don't think you're playing either of the equipment without the Stoneforge Mystic. But your argument of playing the Stoneforge Mystic without those equipments is strong, I think, because there's stuff like Jit, I mean Skull Clamp, even
Lion Sash,
even
Yeah, and
Chainsaw,
also
Lion
being able
Sash, yeah.
to tutor creatures up is a new relevant wrinkle.
And removal spells now as well.
right? Chainsaw, huge addition to the Stoneforge arsenal. So while you're obviously not going to end up with all of them, I feel like if you draft Stoneforge, there's 6 or 7 different ones you could get, and yes, they have different levels of quality. But to me, I think it's I could agree to put it in combo play with all the equipment.
No, I think I've talked myself out of combo play with all of the other equipment. I think it's a probably play.
And I think I want to put it somewhere in this gulf that I talked about between, in my mind, Esper Sentinel to Amped Raptor was a big gulf, and I feel like this fits somewhere in there.
I mean, if we're ranking it, assuming we have like 1 or 2 decent to good targets, I would probably always play it at that point. I mean, maybe at the low end of it, but
Yeah, I mean the question for me just becomes like if you have like Jit or Skull Clamp, I think yes. If you have like Chainsaw or Glimmer Blade, whatever that thing's called.
I think it's Glimmer Lens.
Glimmer
I think
Lens.
that's always yes.
Yeah.
You get it's a 2 mana
Just a second
1/2
copy.
that gives you a creature or removal spell, and it's whichever like you get to pick. Like, I think it's good.
Yeah, but it is kind of slow for aggro. Like you're playing a 2 mana 1/2 that draws a good card, right?
The other way to look at it is that it's not when you're playing it with those cards, you're not casting it on turn 2 like you are with Batter Skull or Cauldron Complete. You just later in the game have like a 4 mana Chainsaw basically, or something like that along those lines.
That's a good point.
But,
okay. I'm not sure I want to put it much higher than that.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but I have been talked into to always play.
So Thalia is our next card to talk about. Thalia used to be very, very high for me, towards the top of always play. Now the non-creature spells are just so important that I think for me it's probably still towards the top end of probably play.
I was going to suggest sideboard play.
Yeah, I don't
Interesting.
much like Thalia anymore. We just talked about all the equipment that are good. There's planeswalkers, there's good enchantments, good instants and sorceries.
I guess with the glimmer lenses and the staff of the storytellers and things that I'm counting as creatures but aren't creatures, like it makes sense that Thalia goes down in that respect. I can see sideboard play.
I think Thalia's heyday was when the mono white deck was good, because the mono white deck didn't care as much about, you're not gonna have like burn spells in there, obviously. A lot of these planeswalkers.
Obviously, we're talking about different sideboard scenarios. I think when you're playing against decks that don't have creatures, this is a more relevant sideboard card just because it hits all their spells than Revoker, who still is only going to hit one spell if they draw it.
I think that combo play and sideboard play are kind of unique in that it's pretty hard to rank cards within them because they're just like super situational. That like that's just their tier or whatever.
Virtue of Loyalty is the next card. I put this here because it is a 2-mana 2/2 Knight with Vigilance that does something if you do 5 mana eventually, but even then it's 5 mana to then do something on your end step. I'm low.
Also very low.
I could live with this card and maybe play. I could probably sit here and argue and talk you guys into putting it at the bottom of probably play, because it being an instant, again, kind of the same vein as we talked about with Containment Priest, where I think that these instant suite effects in these decks that let you warp the first few turns of the game are really strong, while putting something permanent into play, are just super strong. And I wouldn't necessarily discount the later game effect, but I'm fine with this placement of it.
If you're fine putting it at the top of maybe play, you are also one of the people advocating. You were the person advocating for Lion Sash, I believe. Do you have a preference on?
I think I would rather have
the other?
Virtue than Lion Sash, personally.
Okay. Jacked Rabbit is the next one. I have it with the 2-drops, but if you're casting Jacked Rabbit for 2 mana, I think it's a never play for me.
I think this card is bad in this deck.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, what? I disagree with both of you.
Okay.
I think, playing it at 2 is not optimal, but if you play that and into Luminar Casper, we did that just a minute ago too. Or Inti even. If you play it on 2 and then follow it up with a +1/+1 counter and attack, it's excellent. It's so good.
All right, you sold me on not never play anymore, but I'm not giving you much more than that.
I would like I want this in my deck over in Intrepid Adversary. Like I would put it at the top of probably play. I think it's excellent.
Okay, you're winning me over that I've put Intrepid Adversary too high because Generous Plunderer, I think I still like more than this card. I don't know.
Well, I've said my piece. You guys can put it where you'd like, but I would have it pretty high up.
Like I said, you've definitely talked me up. I think this card is way better in the green decks than it is in this deck. But there is a lot of easy synergy there with cards like Intrepid Adversary, the discard effects, Lion Sash, the equipment. So,
plus Joey put a counter on your Staff Storyteller so frequently, like every turn.
That's true. I'm still blown away. Like, you were just blown away of how low we thought of Jacked Rabbit. Staff of the Storyteller wound up this high, and I'm still surprised at how low you guys have it. Speaking of making tokens, we're into the 3-drops. Adeline.
I think Adeline is fine. There are 3-drops I would much rather have in my deck, but I'm not sad to play it. I would probably play it, and I probably in the middle of that list somewhere, but
I think in double white mana moves it down closer to the bottom of probably play for me. It is powerful, but double white mana on a 3-drop is just really restrictive. Prose, do you have an opinion on?
I'm in the same boat as you. I mean, I think it's near the bottom of probably play. Mostly because of mana, also because similarly to Amped Raptor, who you conveniently put it right next to, if it just comes into play and dies, you've, you know, or not Amped Raptor,
Kellen?
Kellen, sorry, yeah. Generous Plunder are kind of the same boat, except this one costs double white and 3 instead of a single pip and 2, so.
Yeah, you do get its trigger on the first turn, assuming you make it to the combat phase, because it's just when you attack, it's not when it attacks. But yeah, I think that there would have to be even more token synergies than we've already talked about for me to move Adeline up too much, just because of that restrictive mana cost. It's a big cost when I'm evaluating cards making the deck. Bone Crusher Giant is our next one to talk about. I can't imagine not playing this card. It's a well-statted creature. It punishes your opponent for killing it. It's a removal spell itself.
Yeah, I think this is an always play.
It feels like the most boring of the always plays, which makes me want to put it towards the bottom of always play.
Well, I don't think that's a terrible spot for it.
No.
It is maybe like half a mana more expensive than I want for either side of this thing.
For sure.
But it is a workhorse, and sometimes you shock their guy and untap and play a 4/3, and you're pretty happy with all of that. So,
and it dealing 2 damage to your opponent when they try to remove it is really nice. Pros mentioned that there's less and less board wipe in Cube, so if they're not putting a creature up that can block this thing, then they gotta take 2 damage to deal with it otherwise.
It's also a curve smoother because it gives you a 2-drop and a 3-drop essentially if you need it.
Okay, I think it's time to challenge the top of our board, because Broadside Bombardiers is our next card. I will admit I was the one who misevaluated this card. I feel like we've talked about some others that people admitted that they did not see the power of when they first came out. I was not respecting how strong this card is.
You can read this card and be like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. I can see how it's good or whatever. And then you play against it and you just feel so helpless. If you can't kill it immediately, they have usually pretty decent options about what they can sacrifice and where they can target. It's incredibly strong. I think this might be our actual number one for the moment.
I mean, absolute floor on this card is above Ragavan because this is the best red card in the cube. I don't think there's a big argument for that. I think putting it number 1 is fine. I was going to argue for that, but I thought I might get some pushback. But somebody else said it, so.
No, I'm glad, because that preamble was me saying I was like, oh, this is the card they're just putting in because it's in the new set, and I was the most wrong I've ever been. This card is
it is really demoralizing the first time you play against this card, and if your opinion was anywhere other than oh, I'm probably dead, you find out really quickly how wrong that is.
Speaking of cards, I feel like I underjudged it first. Carnage Interpreter definitely isn't nearly as good, but I think I was lower on the card than I should have been when it first came out. The ability to just get 4 clue tokens after emptying your hand in the early game, Aggro is able to fight the value battle surprisingly well in recent years, and Carnage Interpreter continues to build towards that end. It's still not something I'm putting super high. It has a restrictive mana cost. It's not always going to be a 5/5, but
yeah, and I think too, yes, you get to put a bunch of clues into play, but if you're, playing this guy on turn 3 or 4, and then you're just spending your next turn cracking clues, is that really where you want to be?
Right, this card requires your curve to be very low, because you want to empty your hand really fast before playing it, and then you want to, when you start cracking clues, be able to play the cards that you draw in the same turn that you draw the clues. And if your curve's really, really low, if you're one of the really good Amped Raptor decks, you're also a really good Carnage Interpreter deck.
Yeah.
I think I still have it below Adeline.
I think I have this card in maybe play, but I also might just be underrating it.
Well, I agree with Prose, actually. I've been on the full roller coaster with this card. Like, when I first read it, I was not impressed. Then I, like, watched some people play with it and was, like, pretty high on it, and now I'm back to being pretty low, especially in this archetype specifically.
Yeah, like, there are other archetypes where I am higher on this card because they can do things with the clues. They can, tap them with Urza or, make a bunch of mana and crack them while still doing things. But I don't know that I love that card in this deck.
That's fair. Maybe, again, I'm being influenced by seeing it perform so well on other archetypes. I still think I want to put it in, like, the top 3 of maybe play.
That's fair, yeah. It is a lot of cards, and it's a great card to draw late in the game, which is pretty rare in this.
Similar to what ended up with Amped Raptor so low. Like, Amped Raptor is 2 mana and cast a spell for free. Like, it ended up so low because it's really hard to have a low curve aggro deck now because there's just so many really powerful top end cards that makes this card awkward. So I'm perfectly fine with putting it there. Deathgreater's Champion is our next card.
It's got to be an always play for me.
This card's an always play for me. Yeah, I was once low on it. I have since cast it. I think it's pretty solidly an always play. Probably in the bottom tier of always play, but
yeah, I was gonna say that I feel like I've experienced the full gambit of this card where sometimes it's great and sometimes it's just barely above. Like, it feels so awkward in some games that
yeah,
I kind of don't want to put it much higher than the very bottom. But
if you had asked me, I would have put it probably right above Glimmerlands. But again, I think that order is pretty. The difference in Glimmerlands and this card is not that big, I think, even if you put it at the end like that, so I'm not gonna.
Scott, thoughts?
Above Glimmerlands.
Above Glimmerlands, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I don't know, I've used this card. Admittedly, it was in other archetypes, but there is plenty of good, I mean, there's cards with low power and trample, there's cards like Ragavan that do things when they hit your opponent, there's a laundry list of things.
Mm-hmm. Next up, Detectives Phoenix. We've talked about the graveyard synergies and not being too impressed by a lot of them. We talked about cards that recently, Bone Crusher Giant, that kind of has multiple modes or multiple instances of value. To me, sits is a lot to collect evidence, so I don't think I'm very high on this card.
Yeah, I don't love this card. I think it'd be good if you're in a deck that's trying to get Delirium. It's an enchantment and a creature. But aside from that, I don't super love it. Definitely gives you a little bit of reach sometimes that you didn't have otherwise, but
I just feel like oftentimes I would want to have my mid-game filled with more 4s and 5s rather than bestowing this onto a creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also quite low on this card. Maybe dipping even into never play, honestly.
How would you feel about putting it into combo play? Because I did have a deck at one point, a couple months back, that had this along with both of the Cyclers. And since they cost 6 mana, it's really convenient with the Cyclers, and I think I like it there. But outside of having a 6-drop or maybe multiple evoke creatures without a way that fuels your graveyard to guarantee you're going to get to 6 mana, I think I would also maybe lean towards never play, so that's why I want to at least give it a chance.
I think that's probably fair because having one of the Delirium cards I think would also influence me to put this card into my deck, so I think that's probably a fair spot to put it.
Elite Spellbinder is next. Where do you guys feel like this one lands?
I think this is an always play.
Yeah, I think bottom half of always play for me.
I like it more than Deathgreater Champion, is that fair?
Yeah, it's lets you take a card away, it's got flying. I don't know, those are both true statements about that card. I don't really have anything else to say.
Yeah, it's not a super interesting one. It just does what it does, and it does it pretty well, and it's got a pretty large evasive body for 3 mana. It's just good. Just very solid.
as we talk about more of these 3-drops, like I think sometimes if I am over full on 3s, I cut Elite Spellbinder, but I do think I am wrong to do that. So that's for me personally, it's a probably play, but I think I'm wrong for doing that. So I'm fine putting it towards the lower half of always play. The Enduring card we were talking about earlier was Enduring Innocence. It's our next card and loves any of the cards that make tokens, because whenever a creature comes in with power 2 or less, draw a card once a turn. Difficult to remove because it does the enduring thing of coming back.
Have not played with this one. Seems pretty good though. It's not going to fit every build of this archetype, but when it's good, it'll be great.
My initial unexperienced guess is somewhere in probably play, but I don't know that I would put it in always play. But I think you'll play it more often than not.
That feels right, yeah.
It has the same color restriction as Adeline, but it feels like it is asking more of deck construction than Adeline. Not a lot more, but a little bit more. So for that reason, I want to put it like directly behind.
Yep.
Sure.
Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is going to be on the vast majority of our archetype breakdowns, I think, because it just does it all pretty well. I'm not confident how well all those things fit in aggro, but it's a card I've seen here before. Figured it was worth talking about.
I think it still does everything that you enjoy from it in aggro. I'm trying to kind of use Ragavan as my sighting in spot for this card. I'm trying to decide which of them I would rank higher in terms of red cards.
My concern with it is more so that we've already talked about so many good 3s that we've put into always play and probably play, and we have more good 3s coming. Like, I'm not confident this card that makes a 2/2 that makes a treasure.
Well, I think that I don't know. I think Fable is better than a lot of those 3s personally. I think it's another card that you're going to get less often because you're just never going to wheel it, or even get it past second or third pick in a pack.
Yeah, archetype notwithstanding, this is an always play for me if I can produce red mana reliably enough.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's going to be always play here as well.
Okay. Are you guys...
I'm not sure exactly where I would put it, but...
Yeah, I feel like we got to talk about it.
It's not the most aggressive card, but it just does so many things that it's going to propel you to where you're busted 4s can take the day afterwards.
Yeah, the 4s and 5s that keep creeping in. So
yeah,
I kind of want to place it somewhere around Stoneforge, but I have a feeling you guys want it higher.
I think I would want it higher than Figure of Destiny personally, but maybe I'm being...
No, I like that. I might even go one higher, but it's not a... It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I can relent those slots. I mean, not really. I don't think I have it that high, but you both seem very confident in it, so I will relent.
Last deck I drafted had Fable, the Mirror Breaker, and Felia, and it was a great time in an aggro.
I was about to bring that up as we're about to talk about Flicker Wisp, and you're right, that is pretty sick to do.
Do you see how Felia just keeps coming up with hey, this is great, let's do this. Felia rules, man.
Felia's in the top 5 right now, even if it slips out of the top 5. I think we're all in agreement, Felia.
You know what? If another cool thing gets pointed out that Felia can do, it's moving up a spot. So just if that comes up organically.
Flicker Wisp is our next one to talk about. Definitely not as explosive as Felia can be, but still pretty good. Again, I don't want to just start grouping all the cards that cost double mana together, but for me, I think this one's towards the higher end of probably play, but I don't know.
Yeah, this one is tricky.
It's weird because it has a double mana cost. It only does its thing one time.
But that one time can be a removal spell in a lot of matchups.
For sure. It can remove your opponent's things.
Things that it answers that just don't get to come back for whatever reason, and then it's a 3-power flyer that did that, so...
Yeah.
I think I'm going to put it above Adversary, which just shows how strong Scott's argument was for Jacked Rabbit earlier. Rabble Master is our next one to talk about.
This is a maybe play for me.
I really like Rabble Master, but it's got to be one of the first threes I'm cutting.
Oh, I think that's even higher than I would put it. I think if you were asking me to rank cards that I thought would be on their way out from Vintage Cube soon, I think Rabble Master makes the top 5. Aside from, like, obviously every time there's a set, they add cards that don't necessarily belong because they're in the new set. And aside from those cards, I think Rabble Master is probably near the end of its days in the cube. I just don't think it's a very impressive card anymore.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's definitely good when you play it sometimes, but there's just so many good threes that it's hard to imagine it
I was
makes
gonna
the
say
deck
that
a lot of the time.
we currently have it as the bottom of the 3 drops, which I think is fine.
Yep.
And we don't have that many more threes to go, I don't think.
I don't think any of our 3s are going below Goblin Rabble Master,
So Gut is our next one. Gut's also got to be towards the top end. In my head, it's above Giver.
I think that's probably fine.
Yep.
Like, it
I
feels
like
like
that
this was
exactly.
a big gap, so it feels like a pretty safe place to slot it in. Not much to talk about. It and Bombardiers both take advantage in the same way of all these extra game objects we've been talking about stuff making, so pretty straightforward.
And if you disagree with our gut ranking, unless you think we have it too low, you're wrong. Moving on.
Lelia is next. Lelia is another one that is a 3-drop I used to love casting, and it just feels too
That
slow.
card has just tumbled. I mean, Bombardiers and Gut both, I think, kicked it out from being probably the best 3-drop, but
Still probably playing this.
yeah, I do think it's in probably play.
And I think it's near the top half of that too as well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like it more than Adeline. Is that weird?
I think that's fine.
I think somewhere in the range you have it is correct. You got to keep in mind too that there are a bunch of cards that this card has more accidental synergy with. Cards like Inti, cards like
Amped Raptor,
Ragavan. There's a lot of weird little interactions that.
True, but outside of Inti, those are hard to time correctly with Lelia. Like, if you're attacking with it and you want to get some of those synergies to pump it up on the attack, they're not happening because Ragavan is after damage, things like that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
It's obviously on ETB. I feel pretty confident with it. There.
Also, Ragavan doesn't actually synergize with it. It's only your library, so.
Oh, okay. That brings us to another card with a very similar names that I always get them confused. Loran, not actually that similar.
I think I'm always good playing this.
Everyone always has an artifact.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even if they don't, it's what, a 1.
It's a 2/1 for 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to find a card that I think it's good to compare to. I mean, I think it's a card that you always want to have in your initial 40, but it's pretty easy to sideboard out.
Yeah, and it's one that if you have too many 3s is like the top of your sideboard options.
Mm-hmm.
If you like, I'm fine to cut it if I have too many 3s.
I think as long as it's below enduring whatever, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I was going to argue for the last, maybe even the last position of probably play.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at it in the context of like where the other 3s are. I do think it's better than Carnage Interpreter, but I don't think it's better than Adeline or Enduring Innocence.
And for the record, I don't even know if I agree that it's better than Carnage Interpreter, but maybe, again, I'm bringing too much other context to Carnage Interpreter. Lurrus is our next card. Lurrus is an always play for me, but I have no idea where.
I think it's near the bottom only because, like we said earlier, you're almost never companioning him anymore in this deck. So maybe bottom is too extreme. Maybe it should be like middle. I think it's almost certainly better than Figure of Destiny, but I don't think I like it better than Fable personally.
Yeah,
Scott?
I think that's fine. I think you can make an argument for many of the spots along the spectrum here.
And,
But that seems fine to me.
and it's definitely a card that obviously depends on your deck more than Fable does. Like there are combinations of your deck. If you have Selfless Spirit, Thar Commando, these 2 drops that'll end up in your graveyard fairly frequently and can end up in your graveyard repeatedly. Loris is several spots higher, but I think on average, I'm fine-ish having Fable above it.
Yeah, I mean, if it could be companioned easier, I think I would put it way higher on the list. But you're not companioning this card anymore in this deck.
So even with all the non-creature spells that we're playing in aggro these days that cause us to put Thalia in the sideboard, I'm still not confident that I consider Monastery Mentor an aggro card. I wanted to put it on this list.
It's bottom half of maybe play for me at best, I think, in this
I
deck.
was gonna never play. I don't like it.
Okay. Okay.
I think the only thing that would I do think putting it at the top of never play is smart, because I can see a world where like you end up with a bunch of these burn spells and like you just don't necessarily have enough playables that you could build a red white aggro deck that I think that you're happy to have this card in, but I think it's very difficult, and I think that deck is probably not very good. So
Flage is the next one to talk about. Flage is... It's hard to remove my constructed goggles because I understand that 5 cards is a lot of cards.
I don't think that. I mean, I don't think it's that bad. We keep talking about how there's really not a discard synergy in here, and we keep having these cards that are just really good to discard. I don't know that I would put it in always play, but I think it's close.
I could see it in always play. I don't know.
I like it more than Lelia.
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere from like the dash double strike guy to generous plunder, I think anywhere in there I would be happy with for Flage.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's all just it's all relative.
For the simplicity of Bone Crusher, I think I actually like Bone Crusher over it, just because like it asks less of you.
It's an instant. It costs 2. Doesn't require you to have cards in your graveyard for sure.
You get both halves really quick.
Right.
Yeah. Screaming Nemesis, another newer-ish card. I've been really impressed by it.
Yeah, this card I think is insanely good. I think it's an always play personally. Probably bottom third, but I do think it's an always play.
So I can't talk you into above Fable, it sounds like.
You could try.
No, because I definitely only feel that because I feel Fable's too high, because I actually don't like it more than Luris, so...
Yeah, I don't know. I've played with Screaming Nemesis one time, and I've played against Screaming Nemesis one time, and both times it just felt like the most oppressive thing that I've ever dealt with in my life. I mean, you know, like Boros Reckoner used to be a card, and that card was annoying. That card costs triple colored pips, and this card is just better, I think. And
how do we feel about this position?
That's fine with me. I mean, it is competing in a crowded spot. We've talked about that a lot. I'm not exactly sure how I would rate it compared to the other ones with pretty limited exposure, but it's been very impressive to me every time I've seen it. And
yeah, talking about the kind of crowded spot makes me want to put Seasoned Pyromancer pretty low, just because, again, there's just so many 3s and they're all so good that...
Pyromancer, I think, is another card that we have to take off our overall cube goggles for, because I think it's much worse in this deck than it is in almost any other deck.
Are we going to say it's maybe not even an aggro card, so it goes down and never play?
No, I would maybe play it.
I think it's a maybe play. It makes creatures. It draws you cards. It's great to draw later in the game. You know, I don't know that I would want it in my deck over most other 3s. That's probably about right, I think. I mean, yeah.
Skyclave is maybe the first double white spell that I'm going to say I think for me is an always play.
Yeah, I would like this right above Selfless Spirit, personally.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Obviously mana intensive, but if you draft
It
this card
gets
early enough,
any
you should be
permanent.
prepared for it. It gets any permanent. Yeah, I mean, it's
Well, that costs less than 4 or whatever. But
whatever.
yeah,
That's
like
yeah.
gets planeswalkers or artifacts or it's just great. It's an excellent card.
One card it doesn't get is Steel Seraph, even though maybe it does if you
Steal what?
prototype it. Steel Seraph.
There you go.
Though actually it does if you prototype it because prototype is weird. But speaking of, we're back on the cards that are good with Felia train, blinking this to get its normal mode.
That is adorable, but I don't think it's very good if you're not doing that. I'm not very high on this card.
I think this card's a maybe play.
Yeah, I would certainly put it into my deck, but I wouldn't be thrilled about it.
I think I like it more than any of the other 3s we have in maybe play, but I like it less than Lion Sash.
Yep, I agree.
I think that's fair.
And again, this just comes down to the fact that there's so many good 3s. Like
Yes.
Gut and Bombardiers lead that charge, but there's just so many good ones.
Yeah.
Out of 3s now, finally,
Always play.
Headliner Scarlet.
Yes,
This
that
is
is an always
what-
play as well.
This is when I undervalued it first. To me, it's maybe right above Containment Priest. Like maybe that's too high, but the unblockable thing just
I think
ends the
that's
game
fine.
so consistently.
It's unblockable, or it makes
And
everything
if
unblockable.
it doesn't end the game, it's a card advantage engine after that. Like it's just fantastic.
Yep. No issues with that.
This replaces like that spot Lelia used to have when it felt like Lelia was busted, where it's like, oh, this card is super aggro, it does a bunch of damage, and it gives you card advantage. And the Headliner Scarlet does those things, but for the most part, better.
Yep.
Hero of Bladehold, been a classic most of the time over the last decade.
Only a recent return, though. This card was gone for a while.
Yeah, I think it's one that gets moved out if there's a new card to try, but its frequent return tells you that it is pretty good. To me,
Yeah.
because there's so many good 3s, 4s, and 5s, like if my 3-drops are over a full, I'm maybe more likely to cut this than a 3-drop, just because some of these 3-drops aren't equally as good as this in my mind.
This card is pretty conditional. I imagine the reason that it's gotten added back soon is because of all the token synergies. Cards like Ocelot Pride, Securitron Squadron.
For me, this is somewhere right in the middle of probably play.
Yeah, I think around Adeline is probably right. I think maybe directly below Adeline. They have similar mana requirements. Adeline has effect the turn you player.
Yeah, I like the comparison between the two because I do like. In my head, I was going to put it above Lelia, but I think you're right. Like, I like comparing it to Adeline, and I like Adeline more.
Yeah, I mean, Adeline is a little bit worse after the first turn, I guess. But Adeline does have Vigilance, has better stats, probably. So yeah, I think that's probably fine in my head.
Okay. The Overlord of the Mistmoors. I wasn't sure if this is a card we should talk about in aggro. It's 4 mana for 4 power of flying, split between 2 tokens, which there's synergies for. And if we blink it, that's obviously great. And even if we don't blink it, it does eventually do something else. It's only impending 4. So
I personally would want this in like high maybe, I think, but I have also not cast or played against this card, so I could be talked out of that.
yeah, I've only played with it once in aggro, and I was not convinced by it in that case, but I'm fine to put it, like, maybe even at the top of maybe. I think it does deserve some testing.
Yep.
I'll defer to you guys. This seemed pretty bad to me, but I've never played with it, so.
Interesting.
I think I would only play it in a deck with like Felia or Ephemerate or something.
Do we want to move it to combo play then? Just like if we're saying it's locked.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Like it's fine without a blink effect if we just don't draw a blink effect, but we don't want to put it in the deck if it doesn't. If we don't have blink effect. Okay. Palace Jailer is next. Palace Jailer easily somewhere and always play. I think in the top end of it.
Yeah.
Can I get you guys on above Ragavan?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think that's a fine section.
Do either of you want it higher? Would you have?
I don't think so. I think I would have put it lower, but I'm fine with it here.
I might scooch it one higher.
So I'm fine to scooch it one higher. The thing I want to propose, though, is I think it's gone down for me in valuation because of the next card we're about to talk about, Pyrogoyf, being more appealing in some ways.
That is reasonable.
Because I want to put Pyrogoyf, I think, somewhere around this range. I want to put it above Palace Jailer, above Luminarch, I think above Luminarch Aspirant, I think below Gut.
I think I'm going to talk you down to that, and I'm going to use your own argument against you, which is how hard it is to get Delirium in this deck, which I think tends to make Pyrogoyf a little bit worse than it is in other types of decks. I do still think it's an always play. I don't know that it's as high as you want to put it.
I want to combat that by saying we were talking about Delirium on 1 and 2 drops.
Yeah,
and
that's
now
fair.
we're just talking about number of types in all graveyards.
Yeah, that's actually
right?
fair. It does. This one is all graveyards, so
on a 4-drop that just gets better, and it's an ETB, so it doesn't need to already be in play. And the reason I like it above Palace Jailer, Monarch's obviously great, but being able to hit the face with Pyrogoyf, right?
Yep. Nope. You're good. I brain farted on the all graveyards part of it, so yeah, I'm in on Pyrogoyf.
I think I put it right below Gut, unless you guys want to talk me down a position or two.
That's fine, but I would still like to move Palace Jailer up one spot.
Okay. If it had ended up next to Pyrogoyf, I feel like there should be more of a gap between them, but still leaving some space between. A card that, even though it's on the newer side, I feel like it's already been in and out of Cube once or twice, Rampaging Raptors, because it just got added back in, I believe.
This card's on the same list for me as Rebel Master. I think this card's just been outclassed and kind of pushed out of being a card that I'm excited to play basically ever.
Interesting. I'm willing to go into maybe play because of the other good 4-drops, but I don't think it faces as much competition as the 3-drops.
There is definitely less competition. I just meant more in the world of like, this thing has rapidly been pushed down my list over the past like year and a half.
For sure. When it first came out, I was very excited to have Questing Beast in red. I still think, for me, it would be a probably play. I'm fine putting it at the top of maybe play, but Scott, do you have...
Yeah, I was going to suggest, I feel like I want this in my deck more than a Hero Blade Hold. If we're just looking at 4-drops.
That's fair.
As I was saying, I would have put it somewhere in probably play, and I think that's a fair comparison to make. A card that's, you mentioned that going down for you over the last year. Sarah Paragon has impressed me less over time than it did when I first played with it. I don't know if I'm experiencing the low end now, was experiencing the high end there, or if it legitimately is just degraded a bit, but I think that I'm putting this card probably at the bottom of probably play, which feels wrong, but...
No, I think that's probably about right. I think this card has... I mean, I guess it didn't really get outclassed by Lurrus. Lurrus was always there, but there's other things that do this now that I think do them better.
Yeah, I kind of want this in my deck more than I want Rampaging Raptors.
I am also of that opinion, but we also ranked Rampaging Raptors higher than I initially wanted to, so...
Well, do you like Hero over all those? I mean, we have these 4-drops all pretty close to each other, so...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe keeping it near the bottom of probably play makes sense because this is, again, really dependent on your deck construction.
I think the thing that has pushed it down for me is not necessarily that 4s have replaced it. It's that we are getting more good 5s. And so, you're going to play this, and on subsequent turns, instead of playing cards from the graveyard, I want to continue to cast bigger spells, which the cube currently allows you to do.
Yep, I'm good with it.
I think we're pretty good to straight away put Batterskull in combo play. There's no way we're playing it without Stoneforge Mystic in an aggro archetype. It's not even the best of
not being happy about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to jump around a ton here, but Cauldron Complete is the same exact conversation, so let's just pop that up there too and be done with that.
Some of the other equipments, but it's definitely above Batterskull in that conversation. We're not really ordering the combo play, but of the 2 artifacts, Cauldron Complete's obviously
I think you can go ahead and put the Aether Spark in there too, because I don't think you're ever playing that card without Stoneforge Mystic. I don't even know if you are playing that card with Stoneforge Mystic, but...
Yeah, it's something that I think is worth giving a try when you have Stoneforge Mystic, but you're right. In aggro, you're not going to end up with it otherwise. Okay. Bonehorde Dracosaur is next.
I've somehow never run into this card, so...
Well, I think it was in Cube and then came out again, similar to Raptor. So I think it is back in, and I think it has impressed me, and fives have a couple of cards I put above it, but not many of the fives. So to me, this is... I mean, you don't want more than 1 or 2 fives in your aggro deck at all, so for that reason, it's probably...
Glancing at the fives, I think I agree that it's in the top half of them for sure. So I'll probably be good with about whatever your thoughts are on it, because like I said, haven't...
I mean, just the fact that you only want 1 or 2 fives in your deck, and there are a couple of others that I want above it. I think it's anywhere between Esper Sentinel, which is still this gulf that I feel like exists here, and the top of maybe play. Like, I'm fine anywhere in there.
Yeah.
Scott,
I don't know that I can narrow it down further. I agree that that's a good range for it to be.
I like this card more than Rampaging Raptor in my head, if that helps.
Okay, sure.
Let's put it right
there. Yeah.
And they're both dinosaurs. Dinosaur Dragon is just an incredible type line, for the record. But
yeah.
Sure.
Fury goes somewhere.
Pretty good.
Somewhere around Ragavan, I think.
Interesting. I was going to go as low as right below Containment Priest.
That's somewhere around Ragavan.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Fury is Fury. We all know what that card can do. I mean, you need red cards to evoke it or whatever, but...
Yeah, but if you are able to, even in the late game, cast it and then blink it in the same turn, your opponent just has no creatures in play at that point. Like,
or
very
Planeswalkers.
powerful. True. Glorybringer is next.
This is another recent redux that I don't know. I don't know where to rank this card anymore.
Yeah, for me it's like very close. Like, of these 2 fives, I don't know which one I want more, so it kind of makes me want to put them right next to each other. I think they'll probably be the only 2 fives that end up next to each other, but
I would put it below, and the only reason is that there are a lot of decks that you don't want Glorybringer against. And I don't think that's ever true of the Dracosaur.
That's fair. I think I overvalue the haste. Like, I got into Cuban was playing a lot when Thundermaw Hellkite was the premier finisher, so I feel like I've always overvalued haste in this archetype, so I'm fine putting it just
I mean, it's still very strong. It's just a 4/4 attacker, but its exert will often not have a really good target, so it's just a 5/5 haster. And
speaking of haste, Goldspin, Dragon, I think I'm low on this card, but I could understand if you guys wanted to put it high maybe play. For me, it'd be towards the bottom of maybe play.
Yeah, I've never been impressed by this card personally. I've heard stories of people doing cool things with it, not necessarily in this archetype though. I think of the fives that we have listed, it is the one I am least excited about.
Yeah, I agree with that. I might have it a little bit higher than you guys, but not a lot, and I'm not going to forcefully push it up there. No. Let's put it in maybe somewhere.
Okay. I'm fine having it like towards the top of maybe. Like, if I don't have one of the other fives somehow, I am very happy to play it, but
yeah,
I think I would probably cut it even if it was only my second 5. Othari is the next one. Othari...
I'm really trying not to let my other archetype stuff leak here. I would put Othari right next to Pyroglyph personally. Probably one spot
that's
below.
A little bit higher than I would.
But that might be too high for this specific archetype.
Yeah, I think for me, it's maybe between Ragavan and Luminarch. So still pretty high. Scott, did you have it somewhere in this high range as well?
I would go quite a bit lower, I think. Still always play, but maybe like near Figure of Destiny.
Interesting. I like it more than Headliner Scarlet. I'm thinking about like my... Actually, is that even true?
Yeah, I don't know if that's true now that you've...
I like Headliner Scarlet more. That's...
Yeah. I think that spot there is fine, right above Figure of Destiny. Now that I just keep thinking about all the times that I've seen this card be incredible, and basically none of it is in a red-white aggro deck. So,
Is there any reason not to put Solitude right next to Fury?
not in my
Like,
mind.
Fury is better, I think, in aggro than Solitude is, but
Yeah.
Sure.
okay. Our land creatures, I put them in here even though I left lands out.
They belong in always play, I think, but I think they're the bottom 2 cards in always play. You're not playing them really for anything that they do. You're just playing them because it's inefficient not to, essentially.
Yeah, if you do end up casting them, Eagles is better than the elephant. So Chandra, we're into Planeswalkers.
I don't think I'm ever playing Chandra unless I have a way to accelerate her out. I don't know that it's necessarily enough for me to want to put her in combo play.
Yeah, for me that's fine to end up in the middle of maybe play.
You put that thing like exactly around where I was thinking, like somewhere around Inti.
It felt like that was the case. For me, it's a fair bit higher than that, so I feel like I would compromise somewhere in this range. Scott, how do you feel?
No qualms. It's fine.
Yeah, I think the card is very good. I just think its faces. We talked about how crowded the 4 slot was, and
yeah.
Are you guys fans of Cosmo in aggro? I feel like I'm underwhelmed by Cosmo in most archetypes, and
Comet.
especially in aggro. Or Comet, sorry.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking the things, but Comet feels like a probably or always play. I mean that card just
I think
ends
you always
the game
play it
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think it's certainly the best of the 4 Planeswalkers we have listed. If that,
Are you guys okay with me putting it towards the bottom of always play?
yeah, I think that's probably fine. I mean,
I just think a lot of the 4-drop creatures I like more than Comet.
Yeah. I mean, Comet brings a certain amount of variance to your game, so
right.
it doesn't need to go too high, but it is quite strong.
Elspeth, I have probably top of maybe play. Even though I feel like I personally have it lower than Chandra.
Yeah, I think it's certainly lower than Chandra. I'm really trying to avoid suggesting putting it in never play because that feels really disrespectful, but I
kind of don't want to play it.
Yeah, I think I would be sad if that card ended up in my deck, mostly because I would much rather have this card.
The Wandering Emperor. I put this one above Chandra. Still probably at the top of maybe play or bottom of probably play, but maybe that's low.
No, I think that's about where I'd have it too. Again, it just doesn't super compete with the other 4-drop like creatures.
I actually think I like it more than Sarah Paragon, so I might bump it up to like here, unless you guys disagree.
I don't feel strongly enough about it to disagree.
Yeah, I'm pretty indifferent.
Okay. Let's talk kind of rapid fire about the removal spells. I'm going to pull our burn suite kind of towards the front. Obviously, comparing these to the permanent spells is a little weird, but Lightning Bolt goes probably somewhere in this range, right?
I think Lightning Bolt and maybe Chain Lightning are the only 2 that I would put in always play, but I think that at worst these all end up somewhere in probably play. That's probably about right for those 2.
Do we think Burst Lightning's the next best one, or?
I think it's either Burst Lightning or Galvanic Discharge. Well, I guess if it's... Well, Galvanic Discharge is an instant, I guess, as opposed to Flame Slash, which is a sorcery.
I should go ahead and pull these others over here if we're going to talk about them all at once. Some of these are more unique in some ways, I guess.
Yeah.
But talking about at least mostly the 1-drop ones. Scott, any thoughts?
I am struggling to figure out a way to place these in categories because, like, I think you want to play some number of these cards in essentially every build of this deck, and the ones you get to play are just the ones you end up being able to take in the draft. You know, like
yeah,
you would prefer to have Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, But if you don't see them and you instead see like a burst lightning and a firebolt, you'll play those two instead. But
I think if you were asking me shooting in the dark, I would put lightning bolt, chain lightning, and probably a braid in always play. I missed that one when I said the first thing. And then I think everything else except for maybe Tar. I mean, I don't know. I guess Tarfire is no worse than Burst Lightning. I want to put it in combo play. I know it's only there because it's Kindred type or whatever, but maybe they just all belong and probably play right next to each other because I don't really feel like they're significantly different.
Yeah, maybe ranking the non-creature spells, like we kind of lose something by how you'll always play just based on the number of them you get, even more than like when we were talking about the one drops. But so I'm fine actually to just leave them off the list and just stick with that disclaimer of I would play pretty much as many of these as I have.
Right.
To a point. I like that cutoff's going to be different depending on different decks, but
Yeah, I do think the first three are significantly better, but
what if we sort? All right, I'm going to pitch a programming shift in the middle of the programming.
absolutely.
What if we leave off all the like burn spells and like pinpoint removal or whatever, all the cards that are like pretty similar, you'll play them whenever you
whichever
see them
ones you
in
have,
some
yeah.
number. And at the end, after we put the rest of the cards on the list, we'll just like quickly rank those in this own little like left off category.
Sure. So I guess Mana Tithe is the next one that would be one to talk about. I don't like playing Mana Tithe.
Yeah, I would maybe play, and the maybe is just like if I'm feeling like kind of cheeky or whatever. Like
I'd almost be willing to just label it as a sideboard card because I do think there are matchups that you would bring this card in, especially if you're on the play.
Sure.
Skull Clamp is this? I think this can make the list sometimes if you're not playing Stoneforge, but I almost want to throw it in with the other equipment because often this.
Either way, I think it qualifies as a combo because you're not playing it without a critical mass of X1s, right? Like
disposable X1s too.
Yeah.
I would probably have this in always play if I was making this list solo. But
I do think that's defensible. I think that, again, combo play being third kind of confuses it, but I think it's closer to always play than probably play. But I do think that it depends a lot on the other cards in your deck, and so there's a lot of times where you wouldn't play it, I would say.
That is true, but I think it's hard to like have a 40 card list where Skull Clamp is not like pretty good
in this deck, yeah.
archetype.
I don't know. I side with like it's just not in my head what I want to be doing if I'm aggro. I don't want to.
Okay, I mean, look, if that's what you want to put out onto the internet, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, Prose said combo play either way. I'm gonna back up that idea, and we'll let the internet destroy us if it chooses to do so. I think we leave Chainsaw with the other removal and just note that it has the added synergy.
Yep.
Bombardment. Is this an aggro card? To me, it's a never aggro card.
Oh no, this is a combo play. If you have a Johnny in your deck, you're playing this 100% of the time.
Oh yeah. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a couple other cards in here. I mean, even like Ocelot Pride or something, but
yeah, if you go really deep on token production, it gets better. But
yeah, there's 2 or 3 cards that make it an auto include. There's definitely more decks that you could slide it into, but yeah, I think combo play.
Yeah.
Reprieve, probably.
To me, it's a sideboard play.
Sideboard, yeah.
Whoa, I think it's always play, but.
Do you think Reprieve is always play?
Yeah.
You're that high on Reprieve, but not on Mana Tithe?
Well, Reprieve draws a card.
Reprieve does draw a card.
Interesting. I think I'm willing to include it in probably play, but.
Well, you put it as high as you'll let me, and if that's the category we're in.
Prose, do we want to let him get away with this?
I think that's about right. I was thinking around like Skyseer Chariot, so yeah, that's fine.
Jite might be one of our few remaining non-removal cards. I still have Jitte pretty high, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd put it in combo play. I've been pretty down on Jitte recently, but or I shouldn't say recently. It's gotten a lot better recently than it used to be, and it was always very good.
Scott, sounds like you might be the tiebreaker here on if it's making the deck more commonly or not.
Probably play for Jit, yeah. Or Jite.
I think somewhere around Lelia is probably right in my head. I think above Amp Drafter, personally, but that's a small change, I guess.
Pre-war formal wear. I was really impressed by this card at first, and then I haven't seen it do much since. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't super love this card. I mean, I wouldn't be sad to play it, I guess.
That sounds like it's going towards the top of maybe.
Yeah,
play.
top of maybe play. I think is around the other equipment is probably fine.
Scott, would you argue it any higher?
Yeah, I think I would. I will agree that it reads better than it plays for some reason, but I still think it plays pretty good.
See, I felt like it didn't read that impressive, and then the first 2 times I played, like in a match with it, either with it or against it, like it really impressed, and ever since then, I haven't seen it do that much. So,
I also I haven't gotten to Stoneforge Mystic for it yet, but that seems great. Like after you've traded off some creatures early game.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like it has to be better than my experiences have been with it, if that makes sense.
yeah, I think that's where I'm at, where it's like, well, I know it can be good because I've seen it be good.
Like Phalia and stuff really strong with it, so.
Yeah, I'm fine putting it at the bottom of probably play because of the couple experience we've had and the reading of the card making it seem strong, but I got to see some more from it soon, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine we're going to talk about Fiery Confluence here because grouping it with the other removal doesn't seem correct. Fiery Confluence,
I think Fiery Confluence is an always
top
play.
10.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it like a top 10 always play?
It's certainly a top 10 red always play. Trying to look here. I don't know that it's better than Ragavan. Maybe Judith it's better than.
Judith. You mean Headliner Scarlet?
Scarlet. Yes.
Yeah. I think I have it right below Headliner.
Okay, I was going to put it right below Containment Priest. I think somewhere in this range is right.
Yeah.
Now, Parallax Wave. How high do we want to put Parallax Wave?
I think it's an always play.
Yeah.
Where it is in that, I don't know.
I feel like I keep slotting stuff like
I think
on
that's
really
too
good
high.
cards in.
That feels a bit too high to me.
Okay, interesting. I thought Scott was going to be higher on this card than I was, so.
I mean, let's put it right below Containment Priest.
I think that's fine.
Priest.
Yeah, because look, Containment Priest is great on its own in some matchups, but that combination right there, dynamite.
To me, I love Parallax Wave. Like, Headliner Scarlet, similar thing. Like, you play it, your opponent can't block that turn. Like, if you just want to play this, exile their board and attack, you can do that. Obviously, Headliner Scarlet also brings its own power to the table, but it also, like, threatens to keep removing their stuff over a couple of turns. Like, I don't know. As long as it's an always play, I'm good. It's still, like, in the top half, it looks like.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, if you want to scoot it up some, I'm not going to push back on that.
No, I defer to both of you wanted to move it down a little bit, and I'm fine with that, even though you saw I almost put it maybe like 5 or 6 cards higher.
Yeah.
The last non-removal spell is 4th Aerolingus.
That's got to be an always play.
It's certainly no lower than Athari. It's probably quite a bit higher, though.
Yeah. To me, it could be like in this range. Like I tried to put the last one above Giver.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I don't even know if it's maybe even higher than that. Like,
no, I don't think it's better than Gut.
Yeah, I don't think it's better than Gut. I think it could be better than Pyroglyph.
It could be. Actually, yeah, let's do that.
Okay. And then I think we're going to be fine to say, yes, there is a difference in this removal, but pretty much you want to play a decent amount of removal in the deck instead of us spending.
Let's do a couple on both extremes here. So like lightning bolt, dismember, swords. Those are all like A tier.
For sure. Chain Lightning, I think I have in that discussion. A Braid, I have in that discussion.
Yeah.
I've been really impressed by Chainsaw. I don't know if you guys are okay with me
Yeah,
putting Chainsaw.
I think Chainsaw is very good.
I also really like Path. I know people think it's a bit worse than.
I like it more than the 2-mana burn spells, but it's definitely the worst of the good. Mind Collapse I've been really impressed with. I still would put it towards the bottom end of all that. And I think that's all that I would put at the top. I would maybe put Absent right below all that.
I think my B tier is like Absent, Winds of Abandon, Pyrokinesis, Burn Spells, yeah.
The only one of these I don't like is I don't like Delayed Blast Fireball. And maybe I haven't played with it enough yet, but...
No, I think that one's bad, and I think Fire Blast is pretty bad now, too.
Okay.
But, the rest of these cards, they're all good. They trade 1-for-1, sometimes slightly better than that.
I will say that I am pretty low on Delayed Blast Fireball in this deck. However, I would 100% play that card in a deck with Lelia or similar effects.
Oh, sure. If you have enough of those, in that case, even though we're not ranking these, I'm going to put this in combo
I think that's fair.
Sure.
If you have enough of Lelia and Scarlet,
I think that card is a different creature because that card is not competing with Lightning Bolt. That card is competing with, if anything, right. It's competing with like Fiery Confluence or something.
That's exactly what I was about to compare it to. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We rushed through that a bit because truly somewhat interchangeable, and because we've already gone meaningfully longer than I expected us to, and I still have another point for us to discuss. I wanted to very briefly touch on the fact that a different type of aggro. I've seen Gruul Aggro popping up in our results recently. We've had several recent 2-1s and a recent 3-0 with Gruul Aggro. To me, this is just if I have Minsk and Boo, I splash green in my aggro deck, or like I lean slightly into green. I wasn't sure if you guys had any thoughts on the Gruul Aggro archetype in general that we wanted to maybe tack on here.
I think the green lean is excellent. I mean, Minsk is obviously an all-star, but like Bloodbraid Challenger, Bill,
we've talked a lot about how the 4s and 5s are like pretty impactful nowadays, and so the real benefit in Gruul Aggro is just using the green mana ramp creatures to accelerate into those more reliably and consistently.
Right. This one on the right was a 3-0 deck, and when I was first looking at it, I was like, I don't understand what strength pushed this into 3-0. And then I saw Gut and Bombardiers. I was like, maybe it's just going turn 2 Gut or Bombardier more frequently. But this build even only has 1 Mana Dork. But Mana Dorks into Bombardier is like pretty powerful. So
yeah, no, this deck looks excellent.
Yeah, and Gruul also offers a surprising amount of haste too. Lots of the middle of the pack 4 and 5 mana threats just all seem to have haste nowadays.
Yeah, we talked about the really powerful 3s in red. If you have the 3 really powerful 3s into the really powerful 4 and 5s out of green, definitely see why this archetype's been popping up a little bit in our queues recently. Just wanted to give it a quick mention. But then we're going to move on to our final thing real quick, a game we're going to play where Prose and Scott are both going to guess the results of several decks. I've pulled 3 decks, each with different results from this archetype. They're going to take turns guessing real quick, and then we'll briefly discuss what we like and what we don't like about the deck. And then at the very end, after looking at all 3 decks, I'll reveal how many they've gotten right. Prose, I want to get your initial gut reaction as you look at this list that does include gut. What record do you think this deck ended up with in the draft?
Man, I'm like, I've changed my mind 3 times since I've started looking at it. I think this feels like a 2-1 deck to me. I can definitely see a situation where, with so many basic lands, that the mana is just off enough for you to stumble enough to lose a match. I do think it looks very good.
Yeah. Before we discuss it too much, I want to get Scott's take. A mention of the rules for the audience. They are allowed to give the same score if they want. The idea is they've locked in the score in their head. We're on the honor system here. But if we're all on the same page on how all the decks do, then it just shows that we're all on that same wavelength. But Scott, what kind of record do you think this deck ended up with?
So my first reaction, outside the gut reaction of wow, there's a gut there, is that the deck is quite strong. I initially balked at the lack of one drops, but I think this list makes up for that with the Mana Vault and Soul Ring combination. The mana does look a little sketchy, but I got faith. I think this was our 3-0.
Okay. You're right to point out the sketchy mana. I believe you both mentioned that. We have 2 fetch lands, but we have no dual land for them to fetch. So, to me, the ramp, we talked about not wanting to play Elspeth, but with Soul Ring and Mana Vault in the deck, it definitely appraises Elspeth's value a little bit. We also weren't super high on Chandra, but skipping the 1s and 2s maybe to play some of the more expensive spells with our mana rocks. The deck looks decent to me, and it has Pyrogoyf and Gut, 2 of what we consider the most powerful cards in the archetype, but none of the really good ones that we talked about. So, anything else stand out to you as you look at the deck? Any combinations or anything?
Nope, nothing too crazy.
Yeah. I think because of iterations of the cube, we actually never mentioned Samwise the Stout-Hearted. I believe this is a draft. I pulled drafts from over the last year that we've played. That maybe is the only card that's been cut from the current iteration of the cube. It being able to get back a card, since we have, I believe it works with Fury and Solitude, so a little bit of something there, possibly. Moving on to the second deck, we're going to switch order, so I'm going to give them a brief moment to look it over while I say this. But Scott, as soon as you are ready, having looked over the list, what do you think about this second one?
I think I called my 3-0 too early because this deck looks better to me. Yeah, there's a couple cards in here I'm not in love with, but I like the curve better on this one. The mana also looks much better. Yeah, well, I already guessed the 3-0, so I guess I'm going to do the next best thing for this one and go with 2-1, but I think I
You
messed
can just
up
double
already.
down.
Oh, but then am I just going to say that every deck is a 3-0?
I will guarantee, since the rules are that I have selected 3 decks of different results, that will definitely be wrong at least twice.
Right.
But, and there's 4 possible results, so there's a possibility that none of them are 3-0. But as the rules currently stand, I'm not forbidding you guys from guessing the same thing you've already guessed. It is just a detriment to you if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, it seems like I'm just conceding one of the rounds, but if I think I'm wrong... Okay, I'll go 3-0 again, and I already feel like I've messed this game up drastically, but
Yeah,
that's what I'm doing.
I think this looks like a 3-0 as well. I mean, the curve is good. The reach is good. I don't know. I don't have any real complaint. I mean, I don't love Delayed Blast Fireball like we talked about, but other than that, I don't think I have a complaint about a single card in this deck.
Yeah, I think Showdown is the card that's been cut since. The only complaint I have is, unlike the last deck that had Soul Ring and Mana Vault, this deck doesn't have any like unfair stuff going on. Like, it has good cards, but it's not like ramping into its 4s. And
But
it's
extremely good removal, though.
Yeah, good removal and doesn't need them as much because it's curving out from 1 much better.
yeah. It has the plateau for its fetch land to find, or either of its cyclers.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot to like about this deck, especially the Staff of the Storyteller, which could have been a top 10 card, but Well,
Well, but it's
move along.
not, so how could it have been?
Yeah, but imagine it with Glimmerlands, with Virtue of Loyalty, with Fourth Aerolingus. There's just so much Seasoned Pyromancer.
Brother, if you're casting fourth Earlingus and you are worried about getting the counter on your staff of the Storyteller, you are doing it wrong.
Well, you just have to get one fewer 2/2 with Trample.
Oh, true. To draw a card. Good point.
Moving on to our last deck. We talked a lot during our appraisals of decks. In my head, the archetype leaning more towards red. Here we see a deck that leans more towards white. We've had a couple of these over the last 6 months. All of them looking very similar to this. So it seems like this is nearly the combination you're looking for when you end up in mostly white. Here, the red is a gentle splash. Prose, we're going back to you. What would you like to guess this deck's record was?
Well, I'm not going to feel as bad as Scott, who may or may not be tempted to do the same thing I'm going to do, but I'm going to say that this one is a 3-0 because I think this deck is even better than the last one. So,
okay, so far between 5 guesses, you guys have guessed there has been 1 match loss.
yeah.
Okay, Scott, how would you like to round out this round of guessing?
I'm not going to do 3-0 again. I'll go 2-1 for this deck.
Okay, so 2 total match losses guessed when you know that's...
When we know there's at least 6.
Yeah. So,
buddy, we may not be good at this game.
Or 3, sorry.
You know there's at least 3. So,
yeah.
But sits between the 2 of you, yes.
Right.
Okay, so this deck has a lot of the best 1-drops, a lot of the best 2-drops. It's weird how little red is here. One thing I'd like to point out is that is correctly a single mountain, which means this Chandra feels ambitious.
Yeah.
Yes, truly.
I think... Do you guys have any other thoughts on this deck as you look it over? Anything to back up your guesses?
No, I mean, it has both of the runes. It has Ocelot Pride and the Johnny. I mean...
The reason I gave this deck the loss is that there's just not as much reach as I would want in a deck like this. It has Headliner Scarlet, it has Chandra-ish, maybe Elspeth jumps a guy, but I don't know. I feel like if it came up against a prepared opponent with like plenty of removal, seems like I might have had trouble closing out games.
I think Parallax Wave does also fall into that category of reach.
Oh yes,
where
certainly.
Just getting to remove their blockers. This deck notably does have all 3 cats because it's got the Lion Sash Pride and a Johnny.
One of the big things that sold me on this one, probably, or maybe being a 3-0, was Felia and Parallax Wave together as well. So,
ooh, good point. And Containment Priest.
Combos.
Containment Priest, yeah.
Oh, Blinking Staff of the Storyteller, you're right.
Move it up.
Okay. So we're going to jump back to the first deck to start the reveal. So deck Prose said was a 2-1. Scott said was a 3-0. In fact,
I now think it's a 1-2.
So Matt, back in October of last year, played this deck to a 2-1 finish.
Oh,
bingo!
So that is a point for Prose. This second deck, very fair, but has a lot of the cards we're looking for. You both guessed 3-0. This was played by Bats in January of this year to a 1-2 finish. To a 1-2 finish. Yeah, Bats, a very good player. I don't think it was a play issue, but
it probably was
severely underperformed your all's estimates with this deck. So neither one of you takes.
Them's the rubs with cube decks, man. I mean, it's 8
for
people
sure,
at a table, and everybody's drafting the same cube, so there's lots of powerful cards.
And really good decks can lose to either variants or just coming up against bad matchups. So it makes this game near impossible, but we're still having fun with it. This mono white deck, speaking of having fun, so Prose guessed that it was a 3-0, Scott guessed that it was a 2-1. I can reveal that this is a 3-0 list played by Scott played by Scott in November of last year.
Truly incredible, man. Just
Oh my god. What is Chandra doing in my deck? What?
absolutely waxed.
You must have not
That's
counted your red sources. Like,
so funny.
it is inexcusable that Chandra is there.
I should have known you were going to do something like this, but for some reason it snuck up on me anyway.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we've already gone a little bit long, so we're going to wrap it up here. We'll maybe be back with another one of these, though maybe in a different format where we're going through it a little bit faster. Thank you guys for joining us today. I've been Joey.
Scott?
I'm still Prose.
And we'll see you next time.